Did he say we're live? Yes. Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. I'm going to make a couple of announcements. As everybody knows, we have the town hall meetings in the next 2 days. It's been requested that the board actually sit up front and together for the meetings, and we'd like the board to be there at 3:30. Carla will not be attending the meetings in person. I think she's going to do them on a Zoom. So, with that, we're here today to talk about strategic investments to lay into the budget and the FAC recommendations. And frankly, I'm turning the meeting over to Mr. Kevin. It's all yours, pal.
All right.
Stand by for a major raft of abuse.
I'm getting used to it, sir. Thank you, Mr. President. First of all, I wanted to outline overall goals for today's meeting. As Rick mentioned, we need to finalize 2022 budget assumptions and the strategic investments that are in both the current year and the 10-year plan. I intend to walk through a histogram of what it takes to run the village. This is a schedule that we've done for the last few years, and I think it's rather helpful in showing the different components between maintenance, capital, et cetera. A lot of discussion should take place around the current investments included in the current roll-up of the budget. We'll then cover what's not included in the investments, and I kind of look back to the late 2019 long-range plan investments as for some discussion topics. And then we'll finish up with the formal FAC recommendations on changes to the budget. So coming out of this meeting, it's really my intent to have a pretty good list of puts and takes with the current budget. We do need to finalize the budget. There's a final review to be scheduled on October 27th or 28th of this month. That final review will then lead into the November 17th board meeting where the budget will need to be formally approved.
And I think board members need to plan to be available for both of those days. In the past, it's taken 2 days to work through that stuff.
Okay.
The days are October 27th and October 28th. That's the board review of the final draft. Starts at 9 a.m., goes to noon each day, or more if we need that. So.
Thank you. So here again, I just blocked out times for this morning's agenda, but it obviously will take as much time as we need to get through all the material as presented. I did not print out, or I did not put on the screen because it's quite a bit of an eye chart. The histogram, and Mr. Johnson down here knows this well, we laid out a 17-year history for the village of maintenance and what's called program delivery. That is primarily user-based areas of business like golf, rec. We have utilities, subsidy, food service, and dock and RV. And then the administration portion as well. So that rolls up to kind of the full revenue and expense for the village. To me, the important things to take away from this large amount of data is if you look at the 2022 budget, and Beth will be posting this online for folks to view later, the current budget has roughly $3.3 million allocated for maintenance of the village. That has been going up slightly year over year on the histogram, but we've been very consistent as a village to spend close to that $3 million each year. There is a slight drop from 2021's budget into 2022, and that's primarily the street maintenance. Clayton Taylor has a little bit less due to no overlay in 2022. But again, the road program is consistent with the PSAC long-range road program, trying to even out some dips. On the program delivery, again, a lot of consistency year over year. Obviously, we've had a lot of discussion about how to drive more favorability through all the businesses by flexing the volume or flexing the rates on various services. And again, I think every year we come back to the pull between providing value for the village and optimizing profitability. And it's not an either or. I think it's a good combination of both. So we maintain the village as people expect us to. On the administration side, again, I want to stress, you'll see it further on in this presentation, salaries and benefits were a significant hit to us this coming budget season for reasons that we'll explain. And when you get the chance to look at the actual bar chart, you'll really see that over the long term, if you look at what I call a CAGR, which is the cumulative average growth rate of our village, if you say that cumulative average growth rate of inflation is 4.5%, we are staying well beneath that. So, we continue to leverage fixed costs where we can, leverage purchasing where we can, CI improvements, and I think we've done a fairly good job of presenting a budget that is both realistic but still challenging for the managers to achieve. With that, I'd like to go into our current investments as they're rolling up, and we could have an open discussion on each of the items. If you have specific questions about a particular item, we've got a space here for the business manager to come forward, and they and I can talk through the rationale behind the request. The first slide really handles docks. Clayton's here if we've got specific questions. One change that did happen from the last review, it was pointed out that I had a lower dock expansion number. I went back to the 2021 approved budget, and we did have $244,800 in capital associated with 32 additional 11 by 24 docks at the Kahidi Basin. I tied some additional expense to that, as that investment has both a capital and an expense component. So the total investment is just under $260,000. The justification for that request, as we've talked about many times, docks generate a positive return for the village. I think there is some challenge here on the physical location of those docks and what's been approved or not approved through the TVA. Obviously, right now, if we were to order docks of that magnitude, we would not get them until fall of next year anyways. So from a revenue side, it really kicks in 2023 going forward. But my recommendation would be for the board to engage the MAC committee to look at long-term what is the best option for all of us to maximize dock expansion and where, because there's certain aspects like in Tenasseee where we could probably do another finger or two on certain docks, understand what is the maximum amount from the original master plan with TVA, what are we getting as far as options with waterfront property, with the Cooper transaction, which will be discussed tomorrow and Friday. So I think there's a good exercise for the MAC to kind of lay out a longer-term dock strategy. Any questions on
Who's tasked with taking that message to the MAC?
Clayton will do that.
Clayton will, okay.
if the board wants them to, I'm taking it, the
Well,
board is in
I mean, they're
agreement
an
with that.
advisory committee. We'd certainly like their advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and along with that, you know, you mentioned Tenacity. I mean, and I'm sure that the MAC is looking at that, but they're also not only looking at dock space capability, but also parking issues and things like that, because we know that's a problem too.
That kind of all rolls together, yeah.
Yes, Steve.
To be clear, in last year's budget, we had another 32 slips going in at Tenacity in 2022. And then we had slips going into Kahidi in 2026. So what we've done is we've swapped out where the location of the docks are, just so everybody's clear on that.
Yeah, and mainly it's what Marty was talking about, the
I
parking
understand,
issue,
but
yeah.
just so we're clear
Yeah,
that
right.
we initially had said we're going to do docks this year, next year at Tenacity. Kahidi was going to wait to 2026. Now we have, so I'm assuming you've put Tenacity docks in your 10-year plan out to 2026 or sooner?
I'll check that, Steve.
Okay.
I believe so.
Well, and that's a higher price tag because we got to move the breakwater to do that one.
So any more discussion on that initial dock expansion? The other one, which I think has had quite a bit of discussion recently, is paving the Kahidi dock entrance road and parking lot. Currently, that's in the 2022 capital for $150,000. In the justification, I believe that current access gets to be a little problematic with the timing of the potential parcel development related to Coopers. So again, I don't think anyone's denying that that road needs a lot of care and to be redone. As far as the timing of it, you know, that would probably, in my opinion, be a later investment if we choose to leave it in.
Can I chime in here? No?
So should we be looking at doing that in another year and repairing the road that we have now? Because I think that whole area down there stands to look at as to what we want to do with it versus just putting a road right through the middle of maybe some valuable property.
Well, in fact, that parcel of land that will come to us in the CCI deal does not have a formal road to it yet.
No.
And if indeed that is developed, you'll have to actually put in a real road, 2 lanes, all of the stuff that goes with it.
And Clayton, I don't know if you want to come forward and so folks can hear you, but I'm not sure if you want to talk through if there's a middle ground maybe that, you know, perhaps if you could chip and seal the existing road to make it a little more accessible, but it wouldn't be like a full asphalt road that would be potentially ruined or moved. Is that an option?
Oh, absolutely. We could go in there. The problem with chip and seal, you can't patch chip and seal that easy. So what we need to do is go in and regrade that and chip and seal it again. And that absolutely is a possibility at a much, much lower cost.
Yeah, estimate of the cost?
I would say 40,000 at the most.
That's what I would favor.
Yeah.
Because until we know what, you know, we're going to do with that property out there, I don't know that we should be building permanent roads.
And that's something we can do next year then?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And how many times a year do you have to do it?
Excuse me, sir?
How many times a year would you spend the 40,000?
Oh, no, that would be one time, and that would be a good 3 to 4 year road.
Okay?
So what I'm hearing is kind of a consensus that we go with the lower cost option of chip and sealing the road and move out, you know, into the plan somewhere, you know, the full option of actually putting in a road.
Yes. And actually, Carla Johnson is on Zoom and would like to say something as well. Kevin, can you increase the volume for Carla? Carla, can you speak and we can make sure that we can hear you?
Sure. Good morning from California, everyone. You see how dark it is outside the window behind.
We can see you, Carla.
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing everybody. I can hear you, Kevin, just fine, but my question is, we had $70,000 in the budget for 21 for stuff that's not going to happen down there at the Kahidi docks. Part of that was supposed to be repairing the road. So if we don't spend that $70,000 this year, you know, that covers more than the cost that Clayton is talking about. My question is, how long, you know, we waited all year thinking that road was going to be repaired in 21, and nothing happened except for it got worse. So how long are we talking about into 22 before we have a better road down there?
So as I understand your question, you want to know kind of a schedule for when we would chip and seal the road for next year?
And it's why there's no possibility of getting it done this year. And that money was already allocated.
Okay, I'd ask Clayton to address that.
I may be mistaken, but from my understanding, there wasn't $70,000 in there for road maintenance. Am
You're right.
am I
No,
wrong?
I'm sorry, you're right about that, Clayton. Originally, the number asked for was $70,000, and that was supposed to be for the boat launch and the road. I mean, actually, that's a lie. That was supposed to be for paving the parking lots. And we talked about the fact that paving the parking lots was probably not a great idea. And I see that paving the parking lot is included in this year's number as well. And the reason we decided that was not a great idea is because if they do develop townhouses in there soon, those parking lots are going to be jackhammered up. So that would be a little bit like lighting money on fire. So instead of doing that, we reallocated those funds but reduced it to only $50,000 for building the boat launch and the road. And none of that happened. So you're right. It was only $50,000 that stayed in the budget.
So if I could make a suggestion to the board, would it make sense, Clayton has favorability in the asphalt portion of his 2021 budget. It doesn't make sense to repair that road right at the end of boat season and before winter time. If we treat it as carryover, can you, Clayton, do a chip and seal type option for, say, $50,000 in the early spring before boating season starts up?
Oh, absolutely. As soon as I get approval from the board on this, I would start scheduling that to do it in, you know, end of May, 1st of April. I mean, end of March, 1st of April, as soon as weather, you know, warms up to where they can do it. That way we could get on their schedule at the beginning of the year.
Okay.
And so how did we get from 40,000 to 50,000?
That was mine. We talked him up.
That would be called a finance trick.
What do you,
We could leave it,
Too many of these.
we could leave it at 40. Are you confident that you could do that whole thing for 40?
Well, I mean, they asked me for an estimate. I think that's pretty close.
With cost of materials?
You know, we'll have to get an estimate, but, I mean, I can make some calls today and get an estimate on that, but, I mean, I think that would be close.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, Steve?
When you say we're favorable 30,000 on the paving this year budget,
No, I didn't say, I said we're favorable.
okay, what caused the favorability? Was it because we didn't get work done that has to be done next year, or did prices come down, or we didn't? So what caused that 30,000? Because if you're just delaying project and then using that to pay for another one, that's called moving the shells around.
Right.
You think, eh?
Sure.
While we're favorable, Steve, is Kahidi, the back half of Kahidi Trail was scheduled to be overlaid in '22. But after reviewing that and walking and riding that asphalt, there was less than 3% of Kahidi Trail that needed maintenance on that. So instead of spending $280,000 overland that, we decided to make those repairs and seal that road, which ended up being, be roughly 75 to 80.
So it was a cost reduction, it wasn't a deferred project.
Correct.
So as I understand it, what we're going to do is take leftover money from this year, defer it into next year to repair the road with a chip and seal approach. And we'll do that before the boating season starts, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
So that was a capital expenditure, or was that expense?
Well, it'll be expense because it's really maintenance of an existing,
Okay, so you're just putting
Roadway.
more expense, you're
Yes.
spending less expense this year and putting more in next year.
yes,
Okay.
Got it.
well said, Sue.
And then the actual project to create a road and to pave that parking lot will move out into the future.
Correct. Okay.
Carla, you okay with that?
I don't see her on.
Okay.
Sorry, I muted myself. No, I'm okay with that. My point is I don't think we need the $150,000 in this year's budget. We can just we can carry over, and I think that's exactly what you guys just said, the 50 grand from last year. Makes
Okay.
it better.
We're good.
Carla, I'm going to be putting 40,000 in there, not 50.
Okay, let me change my notes.
Now, all
Okay.
right. Well, I mean, we didn't spend it, so, I don't know.
It will be
I guess I'm
carryover, but
trying
you
to
still need to
give back
budget it.
150 grand from this year's
Yes.
budget and carry over 50. Can you not just carry it over? And, I mean, I'd rather that than Clayton having to,
Yep.
shave 2 inches off
Well-
the chip
well,
and seal, and
Clayton-
it's already a
Clayton-
mess.
Clayton committed to go out and try to do a quick cost estimate on it
Now.
before the budget's done, so, we'll know what the number is, whether it's 40 or 50, within, an order of magnitude.
Okay.
And it's truly not a carryover.
No,
Yeah, I
No.
got it.
establish that.
Right.
But we should have favorability this year because it's not going to happen, and
Okay.
a little unfavorability next year.
Exactly.
It should go into reserve.
I was just gonna say, you roll
There
it
it
into
is.
Here
reserve.
you go.
Yes.
It's not automatic.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay, the other two, I think is basically a program that we've had the last few years that I've been here. 10 personal watercraft lift expansion for $25,000 and 10 personal watercraft lift replacements. Obviously, the positive ROI for the expansions. I don't think we have a problem at all leasing out PWC lifts. On the replacement one, I'm assuming for a net investment that Mr. Dillingham can continue to do his magic and sell the used lifts at a fair price and reduce that investment to $17,000, but the $50,000 in aggregate for the 20 lifts would still be in the 2020 budget.
Okay.
Okay? A 2023 item for docks. Right now, there's $70,000 in capital for kayak storage. The question came up earlier in the week. It's anticipated that would be more like a pavilion-type storage of kayaks with the racking system enclosed by a secure gate. So it would protect the kayaks from theft. A potential place would be, Clayton, where was that location at that you and Chad suggested?
They were talking about the area where KB and KC is, right there by the kayak launch, right in that area up to the side of the walking trail.
So it would be close to the kayak launches. Obviously, we want to be cognizant of, folks carrying their kayaks a long distance to the launch area. But it would not cannibalize any of our existing revenue-generating full-size docks.
Okay.
Any discussion?
I have a quick question. The PWC docks, what was the location for those?
Do you know the location of the PWC expansion?
Most of those would go in the Tanasi Basin, and then there would be some go at Kahidi.
Okay, great, thank you. Just for the reasons that Kevin said, it seems a little crazy to me that we ever have a waiting list for that kind of stuff because they generate positive income, so glad to see
Okay.
that we have some of those in.
Okay, the other 2023 item, which needs to take place on a regular basis, is replacing the fuel piping on the fuel dock. That's a capital item of $22,000. That is certainly one system in the village that we want to make sure we maintain. Obviously, for environmental reasons, we don't want gas leaks going into the lake.
Is there a reason why you don't replace it next year if it impacts the environment?
Well, we inspect it every year. It's just, at some point, we want to get into a preventative maintenance schedule for that. So Chad suggested 2023.
So he's saying it's good for another year.
Yes, sir. Okay, moving on. Another item that's,
Well, wait a second.
Yes, sir.
There's a comment on here, and I'll say, hello, Margaret, how are you doing? She says that we need docks. Says she's been waiting, people have been waiting more than a year, maybe two, and the lake community is cruel and misleading to all the new homeowners. And I do want to address that these things are costing us in excess of $200,000. There are 150 plus people on the dock waiting list. I don't think, well, I would say any community, but I don't think we're in a position to be spending $500,000 or $1.5 million to get the rest of the 3 docks that we can get immediately, plus a parking problem that we have in the Tanasi Basin. And to push that even further, working with the Marine Advisory Committee, there's going to come a point real soon that we can't have any more docks anyway. So this is a life that we're going to be living in the future, and it looks like it's going to be by, what did we say, Steve, 2023 when we put the last one in? So after that, we're going to have a waiting list. We're always going to have a waiting list. Why we can't have any more? Well, the TVA has given us a limit. And in this land acquisition that we're coming up with, we're going to inherit from CCI that is under their purview now. I believe it's 95 slips in 3 locations, I believe. And
But they're fully leased right now.
and they're fully leased as well.
Yeah.
So there is not an obligation from the part of the TVA to say you can have more. That's where we're going to have to go and lobby them.
Exactly.
And who knows where that's going to go. So just to make sure everybody understands, we can't have everything we want for everybody. There is a limit. And Margaret, I'm apologize, but that's just the way it is. And explanation made.
Okay.
yes, Steve.
I'm going to have a request for Winston, that at our next board meeting, we have a summary of total slips, total available slips that have been permitted that were allowed by TVA, and what the next steps are compared to what we have on the waiting list, so we can have full disclosure to the property owners that says, here's our inventory, here's where we can expand based upon the planned capital expenditures, here's our limit by TVA, and here's how much we want, so we can flush it out to see, tell people, here's what the waiting list is based upon known data.
Right, and there's one more, Winston, if you would throw this in. The reality of the developer being in control of Tellico Village and designing the houses for sale to get maximum revenue out of lakefront properties and gulf-front properties that virtually landlocked today's board and every future board in Tellico Village to deal with this parking issue. It is a huge problem that is going to cost us a lot of money to get out of. And whether you can put, or you're allowed to put 2 more docks in Tanasi Basin, you have to go to those homeowners and say, you know, what's the effect of the equity going to be on their house or the inconvenience when our people are parking or on a holiday to get in there and park, and then expanding to their streets and in front of their driveways. So there's an issue there that we have to address.
Yeah, and Pat, to follow on that, later on in the stuff that's not included for the future, one thing that was identified in that long-range plan is a solution to the parking needs to be addressed. So to me, it makes sense to engage the MAC first, figure out, like Steve said, what do we have relative to TVA and shoreline? And then secondarily, when that parking issue needs to kind of come inside, coincide and figure out that it's not prohibitive for parking.
Winston, you're on the next board agenda for a full quarterly operations review. I'd like you to include the stuff that Steve just asked you for in that review. It'll be in the open meeting so all the property owners can hear it.
Okay. Going on to golf. The largest item, obviously, for what's right now slated for 2023 is $750,000 of capital, and I estimated $50,000 of additional operating expense that would go along with a new facility for a total investment of about $800,000. It would be a TVPOA practice facility. The justification would be to enhance the golf experience with more year-round options. It was discussed previously that this would be a great project to work with Timeless Teleco on potential funding. Just not sure, what's on Timeless Teleco's plate, if they would be able to achieve that level of funding from the golf community all of next year. So this is one that I would suggest, like we've done with the covered pickleball courts. If the board chooses to, we could move this below the line, still have it part of the capital plan for 2023, and then rationalize the spend between the POA and Timeless Teleco when that comes forward. Yes, Steve?
Okay, I agree with below the line. Realizing we wouldn't get a business plan now because it's 2023. But I see this very similar to the, as you mentioned, the covered pickleball or pickleplex complex. With the subsidies we have for golf now and in the future, unless this thing shows that it's cash positive because it's generating so much revenue, I think what needs to happen is a full court press for those golfers such as myself and others who might be interested in contributing to Timeless Teleco to make this project happen like the pickleball players did.
Exactly, because this will not be like a pavilion at Tokwa or
Right.
Kahidi or community center. This will be primarily, all my green lights are on.
You're dead.
There it is, back on.
Okay, so.
No, it's flashing.
Now I'm on again. So, again, I'm thinking in terms of Steve, just like we did with the pickleball, that was planned, let's see, we were in 2018, we were planning for this for being 5 years out, 2023. Timeless Teleco stepped up in that time, said we want it sooner, and put on their project. Just a perfect example of how that works, because the people that don't play pickleball didn't finance it. The people that aren't playing golf will not finance this.
So one of the things that needs to happen, and I don't know if it has yet, has Timeless Teleco been approached on this project?
I believe Chris Sykes is here. I believe he met with Simon and the folks at Timeless Teleco.
Yes, sir. We've had some meetings with Simon, Winston, and I, and planted the seed on how to drop us below the line and fund it like you guys have suggested.
Okay, and then one other question is, at what point would you have at least a concept plan to bring to the board? Because if you recall, on the Pickleplex project, that's exactly what happened. The board has to approve these.
For sure.
Because it'll be on our property, and it'll be our responsibility to maintain into the future.
That's in the works. We're working
Okay.
with our golf course architect on a site plan. We've had some back and forth on that, so it's being revamped and adjusted. I'm using some relationships to get some free architectural renderings of the
That's
facility.
always good. I like the word free.
Yeah, well, we're working on all that. I'm bartering some relationships, obviously, but, you know, the deeper we go down this path, the more robust the facility concept becomes because we see greater and greater opportunity. I know Winston, myself, and Kevin went to visit the new facility at Tennessee National last week, and I think there's really a opportunity to draw in non-golfers for this facility, a top golf type of concept that we can incorporate into it and use the entire same sort of site plan. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, I actually see this as a perfect timeless teleco project.
So what I'd like to suggest to the board is, as long as I'm moving it below the line, I don't think I'll be able to get a lot of time in to complete it in November, but maybe for the December board meeting, work through a complete business plan for that whole project, because there's financing considerations, incremental revenue that it would bring to the POA. The cost should get nailed down in the whole scope. So I'd rather just take a little bit of time and present a full business plan for that investment for you guys to consider.
Simon?
Can you be ready?
No, wait a
In
second.
December?
No, wait a second. You have a guy back there. Simon, could you come up here? And again, Simon is not the chair of Timeless Teleco any longer.
Well,
but-
he's no longer on the committee.
Right, but he was when this process was worked up. How long did it take you from, we've got a great idea on a pickleplex, to the point that you started fundraising? How long did it take? As I recall, it was at least 6 or 8 months.
Yes, about 6 months. I am still on the board. I'm not the chair of the
Yeah.
board, but I am still a part of the, and this has been discussed, and it's been discussed with the Thomas Teleco. It's not been official. It's been accepted and gone through. It's
Yeah.
not been official
So-
request yet.
so-
But people on the board are interested in doing it. It's a perfect example of why the foundation was put together, and this is a great project in my mind.
So December may be a little aggressive.
Let me say that this is not for budget year. This is for the plan. There's no
Right.
need for us to do a detail.
I
No.
understand.
Right.
That's fine. If
I
you
suggest
wanna
you
give me
move
more
that
time,
into
I
next,
appreciate it.
get your plan in place next year, because next year it's gonna be in the budget year. So
Chris
there's no
is
need to
nodding,
rush
so-
through right
Yeah.
now to get it done.
Well, it's going to take some heat off of him, too.
I
Yeah,
actually
we're at
saw
the
Chris
mercy of
glance
some of
at my
these.
question is, will you be ready in December?
No.
And he went,
No, don't.
So I think we will not do it in December.
Considering how much money we're spending on some of the planning, it being free of charge, we're kind of at the mercy of those folks.
Right.
Okay.
So,
Take your time.
you know, whenever they get motivated to help us see it through, and obviously we're making a lot of adjustments here at the last minute as we continue to
So we'll
revamp the
slate it for
concept.
a board
Early
meeting
year.
sometime in the first quarter of next year.
Perfect.
Okay.
Chris, question for you.
Yes, sir.
The Pickleplex project had a champion, and that was the pickleball club. Question is, do you have a champion that's driving this? Can you give me a name or a group that is
Well, the
pushing
Golf
this?
Advisory Committee's on board for sure.
I'm
And-
seeing if Carla Johnson is raising her hand.
Is
but
she?
She is. Carla, can we
We'll-
commit you to
We'll bring as many
champion
folks
it?
as necessary into the fold to champion
I
this
I would
project.
highly recommend you
Sure.
have a champion that drives this project.
You got it.
Can I just make a quick comment? Chris knows that I'm definitely on board with this project. However, I don't think we should give them too much time, because I've seen this go from estimates of $150,000 to $250 to $500, and now we're at $800. So don't give him too much time, because it'll be well over $1 million. So, but he knows that I'm on board to champion this project and to work with creative ways of financing it. And several of our people from the golfing community have approached me actually and asked to be included in private funding or, other creative financing for this. So I think that he'll have good support moving forward. And yes, you can sign me up as a key supporter.
Thank you, Carla.
So Simon, it seems to me that this facility has a major opportunity for a significant corporate donor
Multiple.
with their name on it.
Multiples.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the vision that we're looking at for the next 5, 10, 15 years.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So just go out there and tell them you need $1 million, and then we'll build Topgolf here in the village.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Chris. Time. All right, the next item in the 2022 capital plan, there's 400,000 even, and that is for sewer system remediation. The justification, this is really a placeholder. The sewer study is being evaluated by PSAC and Clayton Taylor. Obviously, yeah, we need to make sure that with all the building, et cetera, that our sewer system operates optimally. There is work that needs to be done on that sewer system, in particular with LUB and the connection of our system into theirs. So that study should come forward with a better suggested remediation of that system. Yes, sir.
Will that money provide any cure to our single point of failure with the one sewer line leaving the village? And if that goes down, we tell people not to flush their toilets?
That is our goal. If you look on there, it says wastewater tank storage. And what we're in the process now of doing is looking to see what it will cost to install a storage tank down there. Because what our problem was with that one was pumping to Loudon. And with all the problems that are going on now with our sewer, most of the problems is not getting it to our lift station, it's getting out of our lift station and getting it to Loudon. So if we had a storage tank that we could pump in until Loudon can let us get into their system, then we can backflow back into our lift station and pump it to Loudon. So that is our goal, is to take care of that problem.
But there is a discussion that needs to be had with Loudon Utility Board of what is the most optimal way to spend collectively, because if they make investments to increase the pipe that we're going into, that may be the cheaper option collectively. But whether or not they would make that investment, that discussion just needs to take place.
So is it scheduled to take place?
No.
No.
So Bruce, how long did it take us to get the water contract done? 2 years?
About 2 years.
Yeah, there it is.
So any questions on that placeholder?
So it could be 600,000, we're just putting 4 in there as a number.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Clayton, you could just stay up there, please. Yes, Pam.
That's what we're in the stages of evaluating, working with Jacobs, and we're looking at how much sewage we're pumping to Loudon in those big rain events and seeing how much storage we need. Because what we got to do is see how long we're being held back from pumping into Loudon sewer system. So we're evaluating how many hours we're having to hold sewer and how many gallons we're pumping there to where we can accurately design a tank size.
How many gallons would you pump a day?
Well, it varies. You know, it could be anywhere from 8 million to 12 million a day. Yeah.
Don't go there, Steve.
So what's the anticipated timing of bringing this to the board?
Well, I'm meeting with Jacobs Friday on the water study and the sewer study. So hopefully, you know, in the next couple of months, we'll have a solution of what we're wanting to do.
And PSAC's addressing it with you right now?
Yes, we're working with Mr. Hofer and Mr. Hawkey also with PSAC.
All right.
Any other questions on the sewer system capital? Stay there.
He asked me if Kahidi was part of that sewer study, and it was not.
So do we need to do Kahidi as well?
No, sir. I don't see spending that money to do a sewer study in Kahidi at this time, because the last problem we had in Kahidi I sent our crew over there during the storm to walk those areas and find out where we had some problems. The communication has been going out to the Kahidi residents that we located 50-plus areas that was holding water, causing inflow and infiltration into our system. And I think we need to address those areas first, because there's no sense in paying someone to go out and identify the spots that we've already identified. So when we correct those, then we look at storm events and see if we're continuing to have a problem. From my gut feeling, I think it's going to eliminate a lot of the problem. I'm not saying all of it, but I think it will drastically help, majorly help the problem.
Steve, the changes we made in the Blue Book and the landscaping, if we had had that in place back when we built those houses throughout the village, not just Kahidi, we wouldn't have that infiltration problem now. So what we're trying to do is play catch up with what we learned about the tanks are sunk and it's collecting water. You got to raise those tanks up and have the water slope away from them. So we're playing catch up essentially from problems that we've had for a long time.
And
So
the catch
so
up
the
is,
official position is that you fixed the 50 that are underwater.
Yep.
Yes.
Your sewer system is just fine at Kahidi.
No, I didn't say just fine. I said it'll take care of some of the problems, but I think we need to fix those first and then evaluate our system.
So is there any planned study of the sewer system after we fix the 50?
If we have some big rain events and see that we need to. We
Okay,
may
let me
have,
ask the question differently. Assuming you take care of the rain problems, you're saying the sewer system is fine?
yes, when we're not having big rain events, our system is working properly.
That's the position.
Yep.
Okay, moving on. This next investment is something new for the POA. It's in the 2021 budget. We have 118,000 even for a backhoe, and there is 3 FTE.
Hold it, you skipped the water system improvement.
Oh, no,
No, that was sewer.
the sewer 400, and then the next one is,
300 for the water, which, by the way, links back to the negotiated agreement with LUB. When
Yes.
they bring their tank online, we need to install a booster pump, and that was in last year's budget.
correct. I'm in the item right above that, Rick.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
well,
So
you're in a
100
hurry, aren't you?
Seems to me water and sewer go together, but what the hell?
So 118,000 we've got identified for capital for a purchase of a backhoe. The 150 of expense is primarily 3 FTE, 1 operator and 2 technicians that are incremental, and you'll see that on the headcount request and summary. The total investment then would be $268,000. The justification, the description would be to bring non-contract earthwork in-house with the resources that I just mentioned. The justification is to build in-house capabilities for ongoing water and sewer repair and maintenance, and obviously maintain the tank installations with the current vendor. That current vendor, we spend $1.3 million a year on earthwork throughout the village.
That doesn't include the tanks?
It does include the
It does
tanks.
include the tanks.
So we went through, Clayton, the accounting staff and I went through all of 2020 invoices and kind of put them into functional categories. The work that's covered per contract, and that contract goes for a few more years. We also put work that is more time and material. We pay for the material, but the time for those associated projects, they range, on average, they're about $1,500 an invoice. There is quite a bit of that work that we could bring in-house. So it was requested earlier this week that we do a cost-benefit analysis on bringing that in-house. The equipment Now, this is not a cash flow basis. The cost of equipment, that 118 over 5 years would be just under $24,000 a year. I mentioned the 150,000 in salaries. We've got some additional maintenance and fuel expense. So the cost, all-in costs are roughly 188,600. If we took half of that extra piecework and brought that in-house, we would save 96,500 related to water leaks, 90,000 related to sewer leaks, and 158,000 related to drainage repair. So currently, that vendor is extremely busy through our village. So if we could even do half of that, we would get a payback for that investment in a little over 6 months. The question came up, are you just buying another piece of equipment and you're going to stick it in the public works yard and want to put a canopy over it and just stare at it? We do believe that that equipment would be fully utilized because based on just the total spend for that time and material projects, there's roughly 239 projects in 2020 alone related to that. So if we did half of that, we would have roughly 120 projects throughout the year that machinery and staff would be handling.
And so Clayton, is this a number you see year over year in terms of this kind of maintenance that needs to be done?
Yes, ma'am, and it continues to grow with the housing population growing because you have leaks, more leaks.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so it's not like after 3 or 4 years, we wouldn't have any use for that piece of equipment anymore?
Correct, that's
Okay.
correct, Sue.
And you feel like the 3 head count would be duly employed then going forward?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And I think the
And are
important,
you going to come back and ask me for a trailer to put this thing on?
Oh, geez.
No, sir, that is all the equipment that we will need.
Okay.
and I think the important thing here is Clayton's really come up with a longer-term strategy for how we handle. Right now, we've got Teleco Dirtworks under contract. Mr. Borden, I'm not sure, how long he intends to be in that business, but we are very reliant upon one vendor for a lot of work, and he's very busy. We keep him busy. We've talked internally about, hey, can you find competitors in this space? A, I don't think there's not many, and B, even with the work that we contract with Teleco Dirtworks, we are getting a very good price on. So the other option to this was, well, just pay someone else to do the work. And I think from a cost basis, we've got to be very cognizant of that long-term transition of our tank work and water and sewer work.
I kind of see this as positioning ourselves to get ready for the time when we are not building and installing tanks. We're going to get to a point where we're at build-out, and you're not going to have need for tank setting, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to have a capability to do these repairs like this.
I
So-
agree, and long term, it'll be a lot easier to transition into this in phases like this, to take this whole job over, than it will be to just 1 year train massive amounts of people, massive equipment.
Exactly. And Teleco Dirtworks has been a great partner with responding promptly to emergencies in the village. Steve, you brought up, the recent events with water and sewer. Clayton's team needs to respond quickly and get that stuff fixed. And it's a lot easier when the backhoe and the staff are here to assist in that, so.
So did I hear you say we spent $1.3 million with Teleco Dirtworks?
Yes, sir.
In total?
That was in their 1099 for
Okay.
2020.
And if you back out the tank installations, what's that $1.3 million?
I could give you the breakdown of all that $1.3 million by category.
Okay, because what you're saying here is in total, you're going to take their bill from $1.3 million down to $1 million, everything being equal.
Correct.
So if let's just ballpark it, let's say tanks are $1 million of the $1.3 million. You're basically saying all you're going to spend is on tank installation. What I'm looking for is, we're going to be adding cost, and you're committing now to cut $300,000 out of the spend.
Yes,
Okay?
yep.
Steve, I would look at it as just a number. I think strategically, they're looking at positioning themselves to handle the future. And also, I'd remind the board of the benefit of the change in the leaf and brush pickup system. Do you remember the number we saved there?
It was significant.
Same scenario going on here with Clayton's.
And Steve, where that spend comes through, you know, some of it's warranty work, so it's built into the warranty reserve, and, but yes, we would definitely cut that spend.
I'm all for bringing it in-house, but based upon these numbers, it says it's a no-brainer. I just want to make sure we've got commitments that bill's coming down $300,000.
Yep,
What you don't want to see is it going to 1.6, right?
Okay.
okay.
And I jumped the gun on the next one. I don't know that there's a lot more discussion to have on that. That was already in the budget from last year going forward. There's actually a second booster pump, and it's out about 8 years.
Correct, and that's still in the long-range plan for that 8-year, I think it's 2026 or so.
And that may change based on this study, but that was at the point in time when we did our negotiation, we would need possibly 4 pumps. But at that point in time, they thought we could get by with 2, so we'll see. Anyway, that's where we are, is we definitely need 1 in '22, and then we're going to need 1 in the out years, whether it's 8 years out or 5 years out, we'll see.
So with the supply issues, and since we're going to need at least 1 pump, is that pump on order yet?
I don't know.
No, sir. We will have our meeting Friday, and Mr. Johnson will be part of that. We will get this final proposal and understanding of how we're going to move forward. We'll decide that Friday, and then we'll start ordering whatever we need to order.
Bruce, the next step in the LUB contract was when they complete the tank, right?
Correct.
And that's scheduled for June?
I think it's the second quarter of June, I believe it's when it is, yes.
Okay. What's the lead time on that booster pump?
It depends on which one it is.
Okay.
You know, they think 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
You need to understand too that when they say a pump, we're talking about not just pump, but pump house.
Oh, yeah, I understand.
It's the whole thing.
Right.
That's what I was going to ask. So that 300,000 is just the booster pump, and anything else it needs to run? Is
You
that?
will not include an emergency generator, because on first stage that we did, we were going to put the pump in and put it in an enclosure to protect it from the elements. And should things happen that we need to, we use our emergency generator that we currently have to work that.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. The next item, I talked a little bit about it at the start of this meeting. It's really we have almost $1 million in expense related to maintenance of our streets and buildings. The biggest portion of that, obviously, is in $650,000 related to pavement preservation. I think in one of our budget meetings, we talked about the updated schedule of neighborhoods that would be addressed in the pavement preservation. We tried to even out the street spend, which was a goal from last year's budget, to try to even out the dip that occurred during 2022. We have $50,000 in here for the final repair of Chota Road, south entrance. So any questions on?
Yeah,
on the
I got
maintenance?
some questions on the Chota Road repair. Tell me what it is you think you're going to do for 50 grand.
I don't think we can complete that road for 50,000. That was the budget number that was in there for this year. I have a meeting with 2 different contractors tomorrow to look at that street, to fix it accurately. We're not going to go back and just keep throwing a Band-Aid on it. We're going to take it all the way back down to the base and bring it back up to where it
Because I don't
should
want
be.
to do this again.
No, sir.
So
So,
basically, you need money in the budget to take the street all the way down to the rock
yes, sir,
and then repave it from scratch,
correct.
going how far up the hill?
About, but middle ways between the Chota Center entrance
Yep,
and the gas station entrance.
okay.
The village center entrance and the gas
Not
station.
that far.
About middle ways between there.
Okay.
Starts at 444.
So
Yes,
if
the-
50 grand isn't the right number, what is?
I'll have a more accurate number this week.
Okay, so I just crossed out the 50,000 because I know it's going to be more.
And is that this year or next year?
I don't think we'll get it paved this year. I would love to, but I think the weather's going to get us before we can get there. But we can certainly get on the schedule for spring of next year,
Yeah,
early
so
spring.
basically, the road repair probably March, April kind of timeframe?
Yeah, as soon as it starts warming up.
Okay.
And you'll give this, the analysis from doing the same thing with blacktop or asphalt versus concrete?
Yes, I have a gentleman coming also to give me an estimate on concrete because PSAC asked me to look at that about concreting it also.
Clayton, we had the same problem up on Tanassi, on north entrance of Tanassi. We've had that in place now, the repair there, for how long?
Close to 2 years now.
Has it started to shove yet?
No, it hasn't. And that was another area that was continued to be patched and patched and patched. And I told Jeff, I said, I'm going to, myself, I'll take on the responsibility of designing a plan to fix that. And we went in and we cut that out and we built it back the way streets should be built. We put 3 inches of binder and 2 inches of topping, and it hasn't moved at all. So.
Okay.
Okay. So
Thank you, Clayton.
I will update that number with Clayton this week and next. Okay, with that, moving on to rec,
Next victim.
there is $45,000 in capital in the 2022 budget related to the redesign of the Chota racquetball court for spin and cross-functional training. Simon presented that to the board during the FAC budget reviews. The current space has low utilization with the village. So that is part of the overall strategy of growing in place that rec has been following.
If I remember right, that includes the bikes and the equipment.
Oh, I don't think so. Does it?
Mr. Bradbury said, yes, it does.
Yeah, so for 45 grand, you can take a racquetball court and turn it into a spin, functional exercise room with all equipment installed.
What are you going to do for ventilation in that room once you get about 30 bikes in there? I mean, it's a racquetball court, for
Right.
God's sakes. It's got no ventilation. So, come on up.
Well, they can work up a sweat and enjoy it.
Boy, I guess you will.
It's ventilated like the other rooms,
Or use it for hot yoga, I guess.
Yeah.
ceiling fans.
So,
Like, I was in the health clubs for a while, it was Court South, we had like 5 racquetball courts at every one of our facilities, and racquetball went, oomph. So we turned them into
yeah,
usable
I
space.
understand that.
So you can put, it's called a big-ass fan, you can put on the top, if the ventilation is an issue. I wouldn't advise doing that right off the bat, let's see how it works. We have an open top there. If it does become really hot, then we spend the money and get a, that's part of the, would be part of the 45,000. Again, it's the grow in place concept.
Big ass fan.
BAS.
Yeah, but
Just refer to it as
isn't there
BAS.
somewhere you can go to determine based on what other clubs have done, whether they've needed it or not, rather than waiting around for the complaints to come?
That's a good point. Some folks have put the big fans in, but they also didn't have the open banister like we have. So if it's approved, yes, I can have somebody come out and assess and tell us exactly what
Well,
we need.
I guess, would you open up the area where the door is then? To create circulation in the room?
That wasn't part of the plan, but we could.
Well,
I'm trying to do it on a minimal
I
budget.
I just see a whole bunch of people my age dying in that room.
No, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. The idea is wellness and health and longevity.
Yeah, I got it.
So,
Okay, the other, Simon, you could just stay up there.
Yeah,
Well,
before
lucky
you
me.
get off that one, the 45 grand, I wouldn't want you to shortchange the project and have all these concerns and complaints by your paying members.
Yeah, really.
So if it makes sense to see what, if you need more ventilation, something, so you can get ahead of it, and if it means it's 50,000 or 52,000 versus 45, I'd rather we do it right up front versus putting it in and then having to come back later and have an unbudgeted spend.
Well, you don't want people to, pass out from dehydration in that room?
Especially paying customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
okay.
So I think you need to look at the number again. I don't think the 45 is going to cover it. You really need to open air circulation in that room, probably put in the BAF.
Okay.
Good.
The other rec project investment, which is scheduled for overlapping between 2022 on the design and 2023, would be $212,000 related to the enclosure of the Wellness Center back patio. Again, I think Simon outlined in his FAC review what the vision is for that space. It's a low-cost option to grow in place and provide additional workout space. Obviously, just like the investments with, that we just talked about with Clayton, this would, with Chris Sykes, this would also require a more thorough business plan to go along with it. So, any questions on?
Yeah, just
I
refresh
just-
my memory, how much of this is design work that would occur next year, and how much of it is the going forward cost of doing it?
12,000 for design. I want an expert to come in and tell us how best to do this. I got visions, the rec committee has visions for it. I think it's best to have someone come in.
Okay,
and tell us.
so then
that'd be 12,000.
200,000 for the actual construction.
That's an estimate.
Yeah.
I won't know until I have a design done.
Yeah, but it's going in
gotta pay for that.
2023 though, right?
Yes.
Correct.
So we'll get another crack at it next year.
Just have a comment, and that is that facility up there is one of our centerpieces.
Absolutely.
I would like this done in such a way that it doesn't look like an add-on, that it looked like it was there from the very beginning, much like we did Kahidi complex down there. You walk up to that building there, you never know that was a new addition, so it just looks seamless, so.
Yes, sir, absolutely, and I agree
Would
with
not want this backside of our barn, backside of our facility to look like a barn, in other words.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
You don't want a construction trailer back there?
No.
We have this
Already
done,
got
it's
rid of
gonna,
one.
it's gonna make us state of the art. We're gonna have a resort atmosphere back there for yoga classes and for
Needs to look
working out.
seamless, like it was always intended.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay. The last rec capital investment that's in the 2023 would be $20,000 related to the sun sails out at the Kahidi pool to provide shade structure.
Just curious, why aren't we proposing that as well for the Chota pool?
The issue with Chota Pool is we have staff, and if we have umbrellas right now, and the big ones like we use up at the clay courts, and if somebody forgets to put them up, we have staff to come back and do that. We don't have that at Kahidi.
Yeah, I
That could be an
understand
issue.
that.
So the other option there is to do the same umbrellas up there and spend about $1,500 and
But
require the
umbrellas don't
residents there to put it
last,
up.
so, yeah, it's-
Concern would be a safety issue. It's
Yeah,
one
I
of those things-
understand, okay.
And there's a little bit of a trick to those sun sails. They connect to a building or a structure through like a turnbuckle.
Yeah,
and-
I've
and-
seen
and
them
steel
before, I
cables.
know what
Yeah.
they are, yeah.
Before you move on rec, I got a couple. Number one is I don't see anywhere where we're addressing phase 3 of the Pickleplex. Phase 1 is the courts, phase 2 is the roof, and phase 3 is the pavilion, for lack of a better expression. Been told by various people in the pickleball that, and through the Peace Act, whatnot, that they do not intend to fund the pavilion. So if we're going to finish that plex out there, we need to make sure that the pavilion is in the 5-year plan. So you need to get with your pickle people, get an estimate. I think we have an estimate for it, Clayton, I'm not sure. But we need to address that if we're going to do that. And that basically is just like you're doing there. It's an area where they have either restrooms or shade and whatnot. It was always in the plan when we were going to do it, and now it's being dropped.
And we were going to do it in 2025, so you could
Right.
position it into your 10-year plan
Right.
for 2025, if they don't want to raise money to bring it forward.
Yeah, and
You know,
also, rather than just hang it out to 2025, we weren't expecting this growth in the people to come in there when we were writing that plan 5 years ago.
Correct.
So that needs to be updated too, and if working with his pickleball people on the projections, we've seen that last time I worked on it with them last year, that projections moved up 2 years anyway.
Yes,
So
it
it's
has.
not 25 anymore, it's now
So-
23.
So I would say that you probably need to look for that pavilion in the 23 timeframe,
Right,
probably.
and I would agree.
So,
well,
Doesn't mean that you do
I know
it.
that
It needs you
they
plan
frankly
for it.
don't have the money to build the courts yet.
no, but they were
no.
looking on the POA to
I
to
I
fund
talked
the
to Walt
pavilion,
last
right.
week, and Walt informed me that their construction estimate went from about 140,000 to actually put in the courts to about 200,000. So they've got a major shortfall, which they're working on now, and hopefully will be able to rebid the project in the first quarter of next year.
You're right, but as
Yeah.
Bruce is saying, the reason that was formed is a group in the community wanted the pickleball complex earlier than we were willing, POA,
Well,
to
yeah.
put it in.
That's where we had
But
it
that
in the
does not
long-range
drop
plan.
our obligation
No, it doesn't. We,
to do what we
if
need
the,
to
pick-
do
if the
with our
pickleball
community.
club had never come along and worked with, then somewhere in the 5-year plan, we were going to do the pickleplex. They just moved it forward, and we agreed.
That's right, that's what
What I'm
Thomas
trying to
Delacour's
tell you
about.
is that the pavilion has fallen through the hole and the crack in the floor. Right.
No,
So it's got to be in there if we're going to finish it.
Well, but it's never gone out of the long-range plan. If you look at the long-range plan, it still sits there in 2025.
Right.
I'm going by the financial plan, Rick, it's not never been
Yeah,
the financial.
I understand that, but you need to meld the two together.
So.
Now, if we're
you need
going to go and tell
need to get
long-range
an estimate
planning
and
that
put it in
you got to
23
move up the
is what I'm saying.
pavilion, then that's something we need to do. And next year, long-range planning is slated to update the plan. They're supposed to do it every 2 years.
right.
So do we have an assignment for him to go back and
No, we've got a year.
Well,
put it
look
in
at it.
no,
23,
I
right?
think
Yeah.
what he's saying,
Right.
Yeah. Yeah,
Exactly.
It's
Go
a
back and tell us
placeholder
how
and-
much that money should be in 23 for that.
so I will work with Simon to come up with a placeholder to put in 2023 above-the-line capital for Phase 3 of the
Pickleplex.
Pickleplex.
right.
Right.
And another one that I wanted you to look into is, I don't know whether it's in this 5-year plan or what, but somewhere along the line, we need more outdoor swimming. Because all we've got is a little bitty outdoor pool up there at Chota and a little bitty pool in Kahidi. I'm thinking that the more people that get here, that pool's gonna be really thick with people if we,
Well, if you're going to do that, if you're going to invest that kind of money in this community, and we're working to solve developer problems that we've inherited, you have a Chota that is landlocked, you have a pool over there, you have tennis courts over there, and we can go back and take this opportunity to reevaluate this recreation and use the land that we have at the wellness center and move this stuff around if we need to, and what that cost is going to be. It's a prime opportunity. So rather than just put another pool somewhere and then 3 years wish we'd done something else, I would say rather than we start putting money in a plan, You know it's going to
We need
happen.
to have a plan.
You need to have a plan. So we need, this group, somewhere between now and the end of the year, needs to put together a ad hoc planning committee through Recreation and go after this plan.
Yeah, I mean,
That's something long-range, we were
It
talking
won't-
with
it
them
won't
just
cost
yesterday
anything.
about
And
that.
that's where we'll employ LRPAC to help
That's
us
right.
with that.
Right.
And finance and everybody else, yeah.
Currently on the pool, it was based on usage. We can do however y'all want to do, but based on usage, doesn't call for a bigger pool or another pool at this point.
Right.
Yeah, but the point being is if you pick up another 500 households in 3 years or 4 years, and some percentage will be rec members, does that impact? That's the question.
Yes. And that is something we were actually discussing with Kevin yesterday with long range at Chota. What's the long-term use of Chota?
You extend the life of other facilities too. If you moved a pool, et cetera, change it into a parking lot. We could have underground parking in the pool.
Oh, God
they
help.
can't, if they can't have a boat, they can have a pool.
Or we can dig a trench all the way from, all the way over to that big hole.
Okay,
you
let's
gotta
move on
They
now.
can make us a,
Make a lake.
Okay,
they can make us a mini lake.
thank you, Simon. Moving on, we've got a 2022-23 investment in replacing financial systems. From a capital side, there's 200,000 in 2022, 100,000 in 2023. On the expense side, we've got one incremental accounting FTE for a total investment of 345,000. Obviously, the justification, our current accounting system is unsupported after 2022. As I've been told many, many times, there's limited analytic capability, and obviously the increased demands on the accounting staff. Charlotte and I have been busy working on load balancing all the work between our existing staff, and with our earlier in the year departure of our accounting manager, I think we learned lessons about proper cross-training and making sure that we do have redundancy built into our accounting staff. Any questions on that? Obviously, the Sue English Kovar offered generously to work with the finance staff on bringing forward that financial system project and lay that all out for folks to understand just what exactly you would be getting for that investment.
And what system is it?
We haven't selected that yet, Steve.
Okay.
It would most likely be a mid-range accounting package, either Sage Intact or Great Plains. People kind of grow up in the industry with a preference. So we're working through that, as well as the ancillary systems that integrate in with the financial system. So when we walk the board through the architecture of our financial systems holistically, I think you'll be amazed at just how complex it really is. So,
And this includes your training?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. A 2022 item for ACC is related to really a carry forward of kind of a 2021. I'll say it was budgeted, but it was definitely not board approved. It's for one incremental ACC staff. Currently, that staff is starting in May. There is one open ACC staff in general, and the board requested here some analytics around, well, what would that new hire do? Just as we walked the board through last year, the two incremental staff that Clayton never requested nor filled, he has Mike Giffen. Current homes under construction are just under 300 homes. Mike Giffen has roughly 102 in his book of business to go visit Brandon Johnson has 92, Clark Johnson has 81, and Matthew Johnson, the manager, carries a lighter load with that. Obviously, he's got managerial duties to take care of. So that 293 gets split among 4 staff. He does have an open position that he has not yet filled. I'd like to push him to get that filled if we've got so much demand. I think the team is trying to get by without spending that. But I think, you know, Clayton and I have talked about getting that filled. We also have 2.
Is that open position a codes person?
Yes.
Okay.
We also have 2 admin staff that work specifically in ACC and codes. The question came up, well, do these positions really pay for themselves? Starting, you know, through September for 5 months, you know, we didn't start a full year. They've generated over 16,000 in charges, permits, and cost recoveries. So to put it in perspective, we've got 288 homes that are permitted through September. There's 26 that are going to be presented to ACC on the October 7th agenda for tomorrow. And last night I was going to lay out like a nice visual for the homes that they're working on. Obviously were permitted a while ago, and the time to build these homes has extended. My guess is you're looking at it, well, I'm looking at Sue nodding, probably at least 8 months at least to go from plan to occupancy of a new build.
12 months or more.
So they're actively
House
going
next to
through
me's
these
been
job
going on
sites.
for a year.
So their duties include job site inspections, job site follow-up on corrective actions. So when they write up a builder, they have to go back and ensure that things have been remediated properly. They set up new builds once it gets approved through PSAC, or ACC rather. They have a whole checklist of what needs to be finalized for a closeout inspection, saying that the home is complete and everything's to the standards of the Blue Book. And then neighborhood inspections, they tend to do these quite a bit when they're out and about, and when there's violations. You know, that's one thing great about the village. You all like to self-police, so we get notified quite a bit when there's code violations that the ACC team needs to follow up on. So the additional responsibilities that they're not quite getting to today are golf course inspections, shoreline inspections, and then more thorough neighborhood inspections.
May I add something here?
Yes, sir.
Excuse me. I want to make sure everybody listening and sitting in the audience understands that 16,049 can be well, no, you can take it the wrong way. It looks like charges, permits, cost recovery for date of 5 months, just because we asked you to do that. They've generated that type of revenue, and we asked them, when you hire somebody, just like we did the purchasing manager, if you're going to be hired to save, we want to see the recovery. Somebody can interpret that number as the POA is out taking my money. They're generating revenue off of my back. Now, what you've got to understand is, so Clayton, if you could answer this question, have you pulled permits from builders because of what these guys have done?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and then they have to reapply to get that permit, and the reason they had the permit pulled is the very reason we approved putting these people on, because we had builders and property owners and et cetera not following the rules, and streets were nasty and water was running everywhere. So we responded to what the property owners wanted, hired these people, asked Clayton to review the first 2 to see if there was a multiplier effect in there rather than hire 3, which we recommended. And now he's coming back and saying, I can make use of the 3rd person. But this is not 16,000 that we're making off the back of. These are permits that have been pulled. These are people that have not done what they said they were going to do, and or violations that are happening in the community that the community wanted us, this board, to correct. And we hear very few complaints. There are still some, and he's got the inspectors to do it, and we've got a help spot that you can talk to them through.
So
That's all I want.
basically, if this goes through, we're going to end up with 5 codes enforcers, correct? Not including the manager.
Yeah, there were 2, we added 2, then 1.
You would end up with 6. There's
6.
currently 1 open, so the 4 staff.
That's 4 plus 1, right?
So that's 5, and then if you approve another one, that would be 6.
I see 1 here in this plan.
Correct. 1, so last year, when the board approved, the whole department had 9. So the 2 that the, Clayton said, hey, I'm not going to ask for them this year, leaves 7 positions.
And I recall that conversation. We told Clayton, you got to come back to the board and sell it.
Correct.
So he
Correct.
doesn't have 2 hanging out there.
Understood.
So in this budget,
But I'm
are you
saying-
asking for 1 or 2 in addition to what you already got?
1.
1?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it. And one other thing I want to point out, because there's this, I don't even know what you call it. It's just one of those rumors that goes around Tellico Village. You called out Mike Johnson, Brandon Johnson, Clark Johnson, Matthew Johnson, then there's Bruce Johnson, then there's Carla Johnson. They're not related to each other.
We're
I
cousins.
don't even want to go there.
I know, but I'm going there because this will be recorded, it'll be played back, and we have a reputation of having nepotism throughout this village, and it's not there. So if you
Well, but
want,
Bruce will be off the board next year, so
I know,
it's
so
no
is
big
Carla,
deal.
so
That's
there's-
1 Johnson gone.
there's
2
two,
Johnsons.
there's 2 of the
There's
6,
2.
Hey, we
and
are
all of these other ones are
we all-
related, right?
We all have East Tennessee roots.
Correct, they are not. I made sure of that before we hired them.
Right. I just want to make sure.
Hey,
Yes, Steve.
hey,
Okay,
They're not.
go ahead.
to piggyback on what Rick was raising, right now, you have 1 open position for the ACC staff for the inspectors, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
That would be a total of 4
I-
right now.
so you got 1 that's open that we've already approved.
Yes.
You're requesting an additional inspector.
Correct.
Okay, so let me go back to these numbers. You're showing today you got 293 houses under construction, 288 homes permitted. What happens with that crew when that becomes 100 or less per year?
If you'll look down at the bottom of the slide, additional responsibilities that we should be doing according to the Blue Book. Right now, the guys are not doing accurate neighborhood inspections.
Okay,
And-
so, understood. Where I'm at is, I think I can support you filling the opening. I cannot support adding another codes enforcer.
Well, you recall that we discussed this,
now the
and
debate's
part
on
of this was when we initially approved adding those people, that we realized that there was going to be attrition, and one of these may be part of this Tellico Dirt Works backhoe operator in the future, if we stop building houses. Huh?
I don't know what their skill
Don't
sets
muddy the
are.
waters on that. Keep those 2 things separate. I guess what I'd like to know is, okay, so if Mike has 102 constructions and he's probably also doing neighborhood inspections, how often is he getting around to those places?
Their goal is to get to each job site once a week, but if you have a lot of major problems and you have to continue to go back to other job sites, it may be once every 2 weeks before they get there. But our goal is to get there weekly. That way you can keep an accurate watch on those
Okay,
job sites.
so, I mean, yeah, so you can do this through the metrics and say, are we reaching our goal with the current head count, and how many head count does it take to reach our goal? So I'm assuming you filling what you already have approved is not going to be sufficient for you to meet your goal.
I don't think so. I would like to fill that spot, and the reason I would like to go ahead and put 1 in the budget for 22
Okay.
is I would do as I did in 21. I would come back and present to y'all why I needed that one,
Okay.
that additional one.
Okay.
You know, I wouldn't just be for just going out and hiring someone because we
Yeah,
can hire
so
someone.
you'll resubstantiate it based on your metrics that you're
Yes, and we
seeing
would
in the
bring-
first quarter or whatever.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah, if I take a look at the numbers, if you fill the open that you already have approved, that increases your capacity by 25%.
Right.
You add the other head, that gets you a 50% increase.
Right.
We are at all-time peak on everything. There's no way I can support adding another one. I can support increasing your capacity 25%. And if you run it, and if we see there's problems next year, we have a variance to budget versus building in another
Yeah.
head, so now you have 2 openings.
So
Right.
basically, what Steve is saying is the board doesn't want to see that in next year's plan, which, by the way, removes the capital to $30,000.
Right.
That's wrong. And then if we find out that the board can come back and we are in crisis mode, we need to increase our headcount again, we do. Don't build it in the budget.
Okay.
That's my position. Other board members may think different.
I totally agree with that. You know, frankly, when we added the heads, you know, way back when, we basically did it mid-year. It was not budgeted. We said, okay, we're going to bite the bullet. We need to do this. I believe that's how we should approach this additional head next year.
That gives the ACC Clayton and his staff the opportunity, an open invitation. If you need them, you got to have them. Justify
I'm
them.
okay with
Come
that.
in and we'll go with it.
So, you know, basically, you need to fill the open position that you got now, and then as the
Justify the
year, as
next
the
one.
year progresses and you have problems, you need to come back to the board.
Weeds, we're in the weeds.
Okay.
No, we're giving it to him.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
It's his problem.
Hey, I'm gonna pull from my inner Mike Colicone self and ask the question is that, you know, the ACC fees are supposed to cover these kinds of things. Is it time that we relook at your fees for this year to see if we're actually doing cost recovery in that regard?
We do, every year we look at our fee structure.
Okay.
On those. So, I think we're more than covering it at this time.
Don't say more than covering, you're supposed to just cover, okay?
Okay.
It's supposed to
Then
be
we-
break even.
You know, so, but, I hope we realize we're at the point right now that, yes, we're building more houses at a much greater, volume. 2005 was the biggest year that's been in Tellico Village, and that was 228 homes. And we are at 288 already,
Yep, got
you know, so.
Just want to make sure that, you
Okay,
know, we rejected an increase in fees, ACC fees, because we weren't supposed to make money. But don't get yourself in a position where you're not covering your costs.
Yeah. And what I mean when I
That's
said
right.
more, that's covering admin and everything. So,
So, and as I recall, in the plan for next year, there is no ACC fee increases.
Correct.
correct.
Okay.
Correct. And not to beat a dead horse here, but just to be clear, and it shows here on the head count summary, last year's 2021 budget had, Rick, you can call them unbudgeted, but there were 2 incremental ACC heads.
Yep.
There's 4 people, butts and seats, in the current ACC and codes, plus 2 admin staff.
Correct.
And 1 open position.
Right.
So, last year there were technically 9. This year, like that base alone is 7, plus the incremental 1, which you just rejected, would have brought his total department to 8. So, if I hear you correctly, we'll treat that 1 like we did last year with the 2. You could leave it roll up in the expense, but he's not allowed to, or just take it out completely.
Take it out completely.
Okay.
You need to include his open position only,
Yep,
Yep.
absolutely.
and no extra truck.
No extra truck.
And 30,000 of capital comes out, and it wasn't a truck. We're trying to get away from everyone having a truck.
So you giving them bicycles?
A Prius.
Well,
All
we're
right.
gonna need charging
Thanks,
stations.
Clayton. All right,
It's gonna happen. you
this
know.
next one is a 2022 item. It's 175,000 of capital related to the Kahidi kitchen expansion placeholder. I think Mitzi showed you the butt-to-butt images that they experience in that kitchen. The physical space is limiting work efficiency and product offerings out at the Kahidi restaurant. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I thought we'd always had the same problem at Tenassi.
We do.
We do.
Are we not going to put any money in to expand that kitchen?
It's not.
My concern is
Can't redo it.
the number,
There's no way.
where there's no long-term plan presented with regard to what's going to happen with that clubhouse, restaurant, as we continue to grow at Kahidi. I know we're limited with space if we talk Tenassi, but what's the long-term plan? $175,000 for a kitchen, when in fact, what if we need another 200 or 300? We need a bigger project 3-4 years from now from the space limitations with the population growth. Until I see a long-term plan as to what's going to happen with those facilities, this 175 could be throwaway money. And when we talk about you need 175,000, and part of the justification is to increase product offerings, that tells me you want to expand the menu. Spending what portion of that 175 were to expand the menu? We are not in the restaurant business. We're in the golf community. We have a restaurant that's available, similar to Tenassi and Tokwa, but I haven't seen any cash flow justifications as to what's going to come out of this business plan. We need a bigger plan than just saying, give me 175,000. What do we spend on the community center? 700,000? This is a big chunk of cash. So I think it needs to be in the plan, but in 2022, I think we need money in there to get the long-term study prepared.
I think part of the, are you pointing at me or somebody behind me? Is somebody sneaking up on me?
No, because this is where you need to reinforce keeping the money in Tellico Village.
Oh, yeah, well, and there's two things, actually.
Oh, good. Goad him on.
No, she's, I know, she's right there in the ribs. I like what you said, that we need to keep it in there because, again, as you've heard me say, we need to keep this facility up. But I agree with Steve, and there's no reason that we can't keep the money in there, aim for the 175, keep it at or below the 175, and charge the group that is working on this to come up with what that plan is going to be or needs to be in the future. They can do that, just like your community did for the community center. And if they see that they're going into an area that they were not expecting to go in terms of future growth or future need, let them come back to us and tell us that we need to back off this a bit, but it needs to stay in there because there is a very strong need.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with putting it in the budget as a placeholder.
Right,
I, at this point, don't understand what it'll pay for.
right.
You know, so they owe us a plan. Yeah, I'll leave the money in there from my personal perspective, but
Right.
I want to see a plan.
But there's enough people in that Kahidi community that have turned that restaurant around, that have got the community support. It's a phenomenal,
absolutely true.
phenomenal impact that they've had. And I would venture to say, in order to keep this on plan for 2022, they would put together a committee and come up with a plan that everybody could agree with.
Mitzi, what was, you know, you pitched the 175.
Correct.
What did you envision?
If you recall, for this year, we had 15,000 in the budget for a design, and Brian Phillips has gone out. We now have the design team chosen there. Actually, they were there last week, they're there this
That's what I
week.
thought.
So at any time, we will have the plan. Now, you all are mentioning like the entire clubhouse. I'm assuming that would involve pro shop and recreation. This would be kitchen-specific only. I've had Clayton and his team out there to evaluate. If you've been there behind the wall, there is a closet. What we want to do is tear out that wall and expand what we have, the space there already. So this design team has already given us thoughts on, you're going to have to redo some plumbing, the wiring is going to change, new equipment would be needed. And when Kahidi was designed, I think you're right, the anticipation was, okay, we're going to serve golfers, this is more of a snack shack, this is not a restaurant. At this time, we're serving about 3 meals a night, and we cut it off at 150 people, sometimes 200, depending on the menu. If they say, okay, great, we'll all have burgers tonight and keep it simple, and we plate these meals for them. But it has grown into more of a restaurant style because of the growth at Kahidi.
Yeah, I understand.
So, this is just kitchen only, though. You're correct. This wouldn't be, like you're saying, Steve,
Right.
maybe the entire facility
And if you
needs
take a look
looked
at the seating inside, realizing we got
We can
whatever we
seat
call
60
the patio,
inside.
I call it.
The Mountain View patio.
Yes.
There it is.
What I see is a bigger expenditure required because of the capacity issue with the number of houses out there. And to agree that we're gonna spend 175 on a restaurant without addressing the other space requirements, I think is not fiscally responsible.
I agree 100%, but I'd like to question, when, I think it was right before I came here, the Kahidi renovation that everyone paid for, wasn't that long-term growth anticipated with that move? Because it seems like rec is confined, pro shop seems to be adequately sized for the course, obviously, and then food service, there needs to be, like you said, Steve, what amenities need to be kind of replicated out at Kahidi, be it a restaurant, pool, pickleball courts, et cetera.
Kind of feeding off that, Kevin, if you look at the very next request was the motorized outdoor curtains. And as I mentioned in that part of the presentation, we have 9 currently. Adding these 3 more will completely enclose that in. And how the staff is handling that situation now, the inside part of the restaurant seats 60. We can add an additional about 60 outside with that portico with the curtains closing, and we're using overflow in the community center. So now with these curtains, it's basically one huge expansion of the Kahidi sitting area, and they decorate in there, they have tables in there. You get a feel of being in a restaurant by using the community center.
Okay.
Good. Again, I know you guys are, and we have a board member on here from Kahidi that more than adequately defends Kahidi, but we don't have anybody anywhere in here that I see discussing Tanasi. It's got the same problem. So
The
what
Tanasi
happens to
problem
we
is
Tanasi?
recently
actually
did
even worse.
But we recently did an overhaul.
And I'm
with
waiting,
the
no parking
equipment.
and no
I'm
place to
waiting out
expand the
there at
facility.
Tanasi 45 minutes for a hamburger.
And I
We
do have-
recently did knock out some walls in Kahidi, if you recall, in Tanasi about 5 to 6 years ago. Redid the equipment, used the same design team, Trimark. That layout and flow seems to be efficient as it is now. I think our problem with Tanasi is there's no additional parking. That was one thing that we talked about. If you expand this kitchen and restaurant and say, okay, now we
Problem
can
is that
seat.
right now, is the service that we're getting. We're waiting 45 minutes for a hamburger up there.
But that's not because of my size of
Well,
kitchen.
there's a good,
That's-
there's a good opportunity for the board to take on a goal for next year, to go look at Tanasi.
And I
Because again, if you expand the kitchen, you're taking up parking. You take up parking,
Right.
now they're gonna have to park on 444 instead of
Yeah,
grass.
actually, I would tell you, if you're looking at Tanasi, you got to look at the parking situation.
Yeah.
You got to look at how do you blow out the walls to make the facility bigger. So that's well beyond the scope of, let's just to make the kitchen bigger.
And the only way,
Yeah.
and based on what we've done before, to not turn the putting green into a Walmart parking lot, to affect the equity of the people on the south side of
Yep,
the
I
Tennessee
understand.
restaurant, you're going to have to go along Telego Parkway, and when you do that, you're going to subject everyone's car to a golf ball, because now it's right against the green, so you're going to have to move the green too. And now you're talking
You're talking a lot of
$800 to
money.
$1.5 million.
Beth, you had a comment?
I think if you look in the 10-year plan out in 2026, 2027, there is 125,000 out there. Again, as a placeholder, it's been there for the Tanasi. It says food portion. So, there would have to be a golf portion and.
To expand the restaurant and the kitchen.
Okay.
I do have in the non-budgeted discussion items, the Tanasi expansion, so.
So let's come back to the kitchen thing in Kahidi.
I think Carla has a comment.
Carla?
If we can turn her up.
I was just going to say, if I could give just a little bit of background to that, back in 2017, during the budget talks, when they were talking about closing the Kahidi Pub, I actually set a meeting with Andy and talked to him, and we talked about not just Kahidi, but the other restaurants. And so that Tanasi Kitchen was brought up in that meeting. And when I talked to Andy, he said, I need less business than more, because the whole point of my meeting was synergistic marketing between the golf department and the restaurant. And so he said, I need less business at Tanasi rather than more, and for all of the reasons you guys just discussed, that we have, parking issues, and now he's got personnel issues, still not being able to fully staff and reducing hours. So I think that obviously we're gonna separate this, we're really only talking about the Kahidi Kitchen right now, but going forward, I think
Pat.
it'll be important to
You're
talk
clicking.
to the contractor.
I don't care.
Okay, so what are we doing here? I think we leave the 270 or the 175 in there.
Yeah.
And, just like we did when we expanded the clubhouse and got rid of the double wide, a committee was put together, needs were, we did a needs analysis, on the facility. And frankly, I will tell you, and Bruce knows this because he led that team, we did take into account future growth in Kahidi when we sized the facility. Now, we also, by the way, made provision if growth blew up. We can expand the community center by blowing out the back wall and moving 10 feet.
Designed that way, yes.
It's how it's designed. So,
Okay.
But that group did not look at food service.
I know they didn't.
We
That's why
did-
we're here
We did
today.
make a provision in the facility to allow the restaurant to use the facility as overflow, but we did not address food service per se.
I understand. That's why we're back at it right now. Yeah.
And that's a good thing.
Well, it's a
Okay.
good thing because they actually got their numbers up.
And they're growing, yes.
And they're growing, so.
Okay, the last two items are motorized outdoor curtains. Mitzi just talked about the Kahidi, 21,000 for the 3 panels. And then Tokwa, that may not be enough of 2 panels, but some money.
Probably isn't.
15,000 for Tokwa.
So the original Tokwa Pavilion plan was that it would be an all-weather facility by having roll-down curtains. Then we discovered that it was a burial pit for old trees. And as a result, the project went from $200,000 to about $450 or thereabouts. And we said, nope, no curtains. But we've never come back and readdressed the ability to make that a year-round facility. So, and I don't think that 2 is going to cover it. You got at least 3 sides of that thing you'd have to do.
I think you're gonna have to probably go 4 or 5.
Yeah.
This is for the pavilion, not for the.
It's for the pavilion.
I think that for multiple purposes, this needs to be done at Tokwa. We're in dire straits for meeting facilities and things of that nature.
I don't disagree with you. I
We
think
need
it
to
needs
use
to
that
go back
building
into the
more
plan
than
somewhere.
5 months a year.
You're talking pavilion.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And will this also include heat lamps too, then?
We'll address what, this,
Heat lamps?
Yeah, 2 curtains wouldn't even be enough to do anything.
No.
They won't even
No,
keep the wind
you
off.
need to put enough roll-down curtains to enclose the facility.
And
That's
we-
what the original
and-
plan was.
And
Well,
we've
yeah,
learned
and
that.
yes, we would need, Sue, to answer your question, we would need heaters. This, I guess somebody brought it up at the last presentation we had. I didn't have this in the budget. I don't typically get requests to close it in at Tokwa. But Beth and I talked to do kind of what we did at Kahidi. The installation of the heaters are
Yeah.
on the top.
Yeah.
Tokwa Pavilion is a much larger facility. I would say 80 to 100,000. It cost 50 at Kahidi
I know,
to have
but-
9 and the
Yeah.
heaters. So that's, I mean,
Yeah, but
Well-
I'd
It's a
hate
big
to see,
expense.
I'd hate to see us pay for the curtains, and then people go, it's too cold in here, and no, we don't use it
Well-
still.
Be a lot warmer than it
Learn
is
the
now.
lesson that we were taught by our neighbors in Kahidi.
I'm sorry?
Learn the lesson that our neighbors in Kahidi taught us, that they put a nice pavilion in, they financed it, they used it, and then there came times where there was wind and rain, and they needed a curtain, and then as time went on, they needed, because it was inadequate, they fulfilled it, and now we're looking to finish it off, and the heaters are there, and they'll have a wonderful facility. So why are we gonna go to Tokwa and do it piecemeal like it was done? So we learned a lesson, let's just.
Well,
do it.
I think that, you
Budget
know,
it and pay
what
for
we
it.
need to do is understand what it would cost to do in
Exactly.
the Tokwa Pavilion, what we've just done at the Mountain View patio.
Right.
You know, in Kahidi.
Right.
And maybe that doesn't go in next year's budget. Maybe it's 23 or 24. But I think it needs to get back in the plan somewhere, somehow.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, that Carla wants
Yeah,
to
go
ask
ahead.
a question.
Carla?
I just wanted to refer to the way that the pavilion was used last winter, which was they enclosed it with sheets of plastic to use the golf simulator in there. And then they put those little those rollabout propane heaters. That was a solution. I was perplexed as to why they didn't put the golf simulator in one of the racquetball courts, which was already inside a building, climate controlled. And that was the recommendation of the previous director of golf as far as use of that. But, you know, barring that, I would way rather see professional curtains than plastic sheeting around that pavilion. I thought that was, I mean, while it was functional, rather tacky.
Carla, I seem to recall, maybe I was dreaming it, but I thought we installed curtains out there, not just,
No, they were
but they're not
temporary.
motorized,
No, they were temporary.
but they're not just pieces of plastic, are they?
No, it was plastic sheeting.
It was just plastic.
Just
Yeah.
plastic?
Yeah,
It
just
was.
keep the wind off.
Because I know at one time they wanted manual curtains, not motorized.
I think Chris is going to address actually what the material was.
It was the same marine vinyl we used for the cart separators at the peak of COVID. And it did the job that we needed. For 2 years in a row, we've had the mini golf league in the pavilion. You know, when it becomes unusable in the winter season, we kind of convert it to some winter golf activities. So we incorporated the simulator last year as well, and we're going to double that up and have mini golf this season because we're able to manipulate the climate a little bit and keep it bearable, but it's not somewhere you'd want to go sit and have dinner or anything like that currently without a big investment in the infrastructure. But again, just tying it back into the long-term facility proposal we have, you know, when we add what needs to be added to the Tokwa Pavilion, we'll lose that capacity in golf. So we'll no longer be able to have those winter activities with mini golf, and we'll lose our ability to have functional simulator activities. And we've looked at the racquetball courts, just the noise and being at a different location and not being able to manage it from an existing location didn't seem prudent to us as a golf management team. So that's why we went this other route, which worked fine. And again, you know, we had success there in that environment. Last year, sold it out every week at the peak of COVID. I mean, people were still not as comfortable as they are today being in those confined areas. So it was the same marine vinyl we used for the cart separators. So, you know, after a couple of renditions, it looked pretty good. We had a small studio that we incorporated. Then the HOA added some actual plastic that Carla's referencing that did not look as good, but they did that for a separate event.
Okay.
Okay, so if we scope out the full curtain heater option, do you want us to do that and leave it in 2022 or shift it into 23 so you could have another go at it?
I'd be in favor of moving it out a year or two.
Well, you've got it in 23 now, don't you? No, I'm
No, it
looking at
says
the wrong
22.
slide. Yeah.
You know, I think that this is gonna come in close to 100 grand. Because I recall that from when they built the Tokwa Pavilion, when they, you know, took it out, it reduced the cost about $100,000. You know, not quite 100, but with inflation, it probably is about there now.
Yeah.
So I would favor putting it in 23 or 4. And then we'll revisit it when we do the budget for that particular year. But I think that we need to have it in our long-range plan so that we don't lose track of it like we really have since we built the pavilion.
Okay.
And by the way, Pat, I agree with you. I mean, it's perfect for meeting space if you enclose it and heat it.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
but at the same time, going back to what Chris said, is that you don't want to make it so permanent meeting space that it eliminates his ability to use it for golf simulation.
No, I understand. I
needs to be
I
a
believe it.
multi-purpose.
It should be roll-down curtains. You know, it shouldn't be, you know, permanent walls.
Well, I think what Bruce is talking about, Rick, is you're going to have competing needs for that enclosed space between golf and food service. If you
Well,
make it,
that's a management issue.
yep,
And that would put us in the weeds, and so we're not going there.
I like competing space. That means you're using it.
We should
What's
share
that
the
golf
cost too, I
simulator?
think.
Once the golf simulator facility is completed, they won't have the need for that type of activity.
Okay.
Kevin, are you done with your list?
yes.
There is one more item that eventually we need to talk about, I believe, and that's the acreage in Kahidi before you get to the main gate. That
Well,
would be
that's on the board agenda for the next meeting.
Okay,
It
as long
is.
as that's included in
Yeah,
our
actually,
strategic
and-
investments.
Yeah, and Carla's going to actually make that presentation to the board at the next
Okay.
meeting.
Okay, and
Didn't want to lose
Right,
track of
Carla?
that.
from my point, could you go back to slide 3? I want to cover slide 3, 4, and 5, and it's going to be real quick, so don't anybody start making fun of me. But
So-
I want to point something out here. In slide number 3, okay,
Which is,
it's the one that's got the docks on it,
okay,
all right?
how did I guess?
We
that?
have waiting list on personal watercraft, waiting list on docks. We had a comment on here about the number of docks. And if you total those up, the need for docks and expanding with the TVA allowing us to do that and us doing it one dock at a time, that totals up to $551,000. That does. Go to the next slide, please. So if we look at this slide, the next one, I'm going to eliminate the first one for year 23. That would be the Tokwa practice facility. I'm also going to eliminate item number 3 on that list, which is bring in-house capabilities for ongoing water and sewer repair, because we have a service. Wait a second. I'm not saying take the money away. I'm telling the audience, pointing out something to the audience here. So you take that out because it's being done now. You go down to the $45,000 redesign Chota racquetball court. You then go to the next one, enclosed wellness center back patio. You go to the next one, shade structure for Kahidi. You take 1, 2, 3, those 5 items out, and you're totaling 1.693, no, yep, $1.693 million. Okay, go to the next one. You take this one, you just do the last 2, we just talked about the curtains, and that's totaling $579,000. The point I want to make is that when we finish this budget process, no matter what we decide that assessment fee is, everything that I just mentioned, the ones that we took out, are infrastructure issues. If you decide, I don't like that percentage, whether it's 3.5, 2.5, or 5. If you don't like what this finance committee, this POA staff, and this board is coming up with, this is for everybody looking at it on this YouTube video. If you don't like this, you need to go back to those items and pick out the ones that you don't want. You want potholes? You don't want any more docks? You don't want the maintenance, the fixing up. You don't want the continuation of this village the way that it's being maintained today, because that's what it costs to run this place. Steve?
And this list is the strategic investments. It doesn't include your everyday capital investments,
No, it
which
doesn't.
are not listed
No, it
here.
doesn't.
That would be lawnmowers.
Right.
and
So
Trucks and everything else.
And the
everything else.
difference is when the sewer pump goes off and it's blaring at 2 o'clock in the morning and you're waking up because you don't know what it is, and you call Clayton and his crew and they come fix it, or you have the neighbor that's building across the street and you haven't met them yet, and all of their red dirt's washing into yours because we can't hire an inspector anymore. All of this money is going to support this village in the standard of living that we have today. And if you don't want it, the complaint on social media is, I don't care about my sewer alarm going off anymore, save that money. I don't care about docks anymore. I don't want them. I don't want to pay for them. So you cannot have an assessment fee of XX because I don't want to pay for it. This is what it costs to run this village. That was my point. And there is the documentation, and this is the video that I just made.
I could say it another way, Pat, is that we discussed earlier the histogram and the fact that this is what it takes to run the village, right? And we can cover that with our normal assessment. And we need to increase the assessment, obviously, just like we do our expenses because of inflation. But what happens when the appetite grows, and the appetite for more grows, then the assessment has got to grow above inflation with it. So you just need to keep that in mind, is that as our appetite grows, so is the increase in the assessment going to grow, because we can't keep up with everyday maintenance and satisfy the growth in appetite.
Well, point two that I want to make is that you're going to hear in the coming weeks that they did not tell me. We are they. We are defined as they. They did not tell me. They did not let me know. And this has been on the telegram. It's been every type of communication that we can get out to tell you when this meeting was going to take place. This is the opportunity to raise your voice and say, I agree, I disagree. And right now, as I counted in this audience, there are 3 non-advisory committee members of that audience right now, sitting right out here. And there's 5 right now watching. Now, I know on next door they hate for me to say this, but there's only 5 people out of this entire community that is watching this, what controls your future. And when you tell me, and you tell any board member, the POA staff, or anybody else in this community, I did not know,
Bruce, I need to add one other thing. When you talk about the assessment having to increase to pay for what the demands are, your user fees also go up.
That's right.
It's both.
Both, yeah.
And I just want to put a plug in for Timeless Teleco, because that is an avenue that we have, and we have yet to see how it will really work, but that is an avenue that we have to add amenities without having to raise assessments. So we'll see how that plays out with the Pickleplex and then maybe the golf facility.
yeah, break time. Please, Mr. President,
What do you need a break for?
because I want one real bad.
You see now.
Okay, we're going to take 5 because Pat has to go to the bathroom.
Doesn't bother me. Everybody does it.
There we go.
So what slide are we on?
I'll get you back. Okay, we're running a little bit behind, but I think we'll kind of catch up. Some of our discussion was more around the strategic investments. What I'd like to cover now is the board discussion on additional strategic investments for 2022 and the 10-year plan. Obviously, it's your discretion of capital investments for 2022, but I think holistically, I don't want to overextend on CapEx either in the 22 plan. Our total capital right now is just at about $3.5 million. So I think relative to other years, it's not an extremely heavy year, but obviously you've gone through quite a bit in capital this for 2022. So I think the discussion will probably focus more about 2023 and beyond with various placeholders.
So the floor is open, guys.
Here is a tentative list I started with some of the additional items that were listed in the 2019 long-range plan. We talked a little bit about Tenassi slip expansion. There was a need expressed in the long-range plan for off-site boat storage. I think the discussion, just like Kahidi amenities, the Chota Rec Center, what ultimately happens there. I think, you know, Simon didn't mention it, but when the pool conversation came up with Chota, I think the question needs to be asked, are you just putting good money after bad, and what is the long-term strategy for that amenity? It came up several times as well. Off-site shuttle parking system was identified as a need. They had firehouse expansion. Obviously, I don't think that's an urgent thing, but as the village grows and you look at build out, providing the volunteer fire department with expanded space may be an option. We talked about the Tenassi Clubhouse renovation and replacement is out there. And then also what I think would be a great amenity for the village, but logistically may be problematic, is lakefront casual dining. So there's not a specific item, obviously, it's more of a discussion, open discussion. So I'll open up the floor.
This question is, do we really envision raising Chota Center ever? I mean, I can imagine us building a new facility maybe up on our land up around the wellness center, but that building, are we saying it's in such bad, dire straits that we need to tear it down and
I
start
wouldn't think so,
another one?
but I would caution this board and future boards is that as we were faced with the Toqua Clubhouse expansion, when you send an inspector in there, because that Chota was not built under Loudoun County Building Inspector's approval either, remember?
Yeah.
And neither was Toqua. And when they went in and looked behind the walls, they found out it was going to be a lot more expensive to tear down a wall and bring the old one up to code and expand. So I would suggest, before we start gleefing out there and saying we're going to do all of this great stuff at Chota, that there is a comprehensive inspection done on that building to determine what that charge is going to be if there are current violations in that structure. So I would say,
If you do a significant renovation, legally, you would have to come up to code. If you do just minor maintenance and repair, you don't have to really do that.
right, and my point is
Yeah.
that if you decide that you're going to do minor maintenance and repair, and it involves moving a wall or two that a building inspector is involved in, and you don't have that inspection done prior to removing that wall and
Right.
calling that inspector, you're subjecting this community to a lot of cost to bring that up to code.
Well, I guess the question that you're raising that I also have is, well, what's the future of Chota?
Right.
You know, and frankly, I don't know that we've ever studied issue, have we?
No, I think that maybe, maybe folks there think that it's not suitable for where we're going with but do we need a new facility and use that for other purposes, I'm saying? Is it, maybe it's not suitable for where.
Change the word replacement to study.
Yeah.
That is something on the long-range radar. We just discussed that yesterday, just looking at what is the long-term uses
When
of
you,
Chota.
when you talk long range, what time frame are you
It's
talking?
out 10 years, supposed to be.
10 years
long
from
range.
now.
Right.
Well, we feel confident with all the meetings that we have there, everything that we have right now, we're planning for the next 10 years.
So so what he's saying is I'm not trying to put words in your ears, but for the next 10 years, he's going to use this and improve the building as he goes, such as converting the handball, racquetball courts to more usable
productive
space.
use, yeah.
But somewhere out there, if it's not going to be suitable after 10 years out, you know, I'm thinking back in Europe, they use 1,000-year-old buildings, and we get them 20 years old and decide we need to tear them down. So,
Sounds like a football stadium.
yeah.
Yeah, unless I'm told different, that's not my plan right now. I think parking's going to become a greater issue there, but.
Yeah, I would
but the
think if
facility
you tore that
works
building
fine.
down, you don't have a whole lot of space up there to expand anyway. You might get a better building, but you're limited space in that one little corner right there, right?
Well, there's vacant land in behind there, too.
Not
so,
much.
Yeah.
It's, there's a road behind it.
Yeah, I know that. I understand.
Yeah. So, okay, just as long as
So-
you're not talking about raising it within the next 10 years or so, because I think.
Yeah, I think that, you know, what we need to do is have Simon study what the future of Chota is and come back to the board with
I
that
would
before we
say-
put any
I'd
money
say
in
he
any
needs to
budget.
say, what's the future of recreation?
Exactly. We
Right.
need to define what is it that we think we're going to need in the next 10 years, and then you look at everything you have and see what's suitable and
Not
what's
in
not.
the next 10 years, out 10
Well-
years.
30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I don't know if you're going to get that far.
That is something the rec committee and the long-range committee are working together on. Like I said, we just had that discussion yesterday.
Okay.
Yeah, I know this is this is in the gray area, but I just want to know, is that what we're talking about? You know, doing it like we did Toqua, because
And I think
I don't think that building's in near bad a shape as Tokel was.
you know, the transaction that we're gonna talk about Thursday
I
and
saw
Friday
Chuck would
gives a
get knocked
lot
down. They
more
barely
options
touched it.
to space that could potentially have, you know, alternate rec amenities on it.
Yeah, so I think that before we put money into the budget, even going out for our 10-year plan, we need to understand what the future is. That's where I would fall out. I wouldn't put anything in there for a Chota Center replacement at this point.
I'd put a line item with $0 in the 10-year plan, just so it's a
Yeah, you can do that.
placeholder with $0.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean,
And what I could do, Steve, tying into that is, I could even put, call it $25,000 in that out year to do the evaluation.
yep. So,
That's a good question about the Tenassi slip expansion.
Carla, you're gonna have to speak up. Can't hear you.
I'd like to ask a question about the Tenassi slip expansion. Can
Something
you hear me
extension.
now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, so I've mentioned this before and received less than a lukewarm reception, but I think that we need to look at some different ways. As Pat so eloquently stated before, we're going to have probably a dock waiting list henceforth and forevermore, and I know we're limited by TVA, which will require some additional negotiation, but there are quite a few communities like ours that I've visited that offer pontoon boats for rental. And I know somebody's probably already shaking their head about it, but I still think we have a lot of people who have boats that are very rarely used. And oftentimes they say, but we want to keep them for that 1 or 2 times a year that our grandchildren come to visit and we like to have the boat, to go out on the boat. If they had the opportunity to rent a pontoon boat for the day from the community, perhaps they would be, because it would be as convenient, basically, as having their boat in their boat slip here at Telco Village, perhaps it would free up some of those spots. Now, I don't know that, but I think it would be worth at least considering.
Well, if you remember, Carla, I think we discussed this last year or 18 months ago, is that we're not classified as a commercial
That's exactly right.
marina. TVA granted us the access to put in a gas dock, and we're doing that at their approval, and they're still not considering us a commercial. And at that point, when we become a commercial marina, we get into a whole new ballgame in terms of OSHA restrictions, federal requirements,
EPA.
navigational, EPA, the whole thing. And
I do understand that, Pat, but I specifically have visited communities where they don't have commercial marinas. I just think it's worth consideration, right, and looking into to make sure that we're really precluded from doing that.
I guess, you could ask the Marine Advisory Committee to study it, but they also need to make sure
well,
legal counsel's
they
involved.
understand that, I think from John, they have looked into doing that, and you're immediately classified as a commercial marina.
I know that. I'm aware of that.
And again, I can rent my pontoon boat to anybody I want.
Well,
And
so-
any group of people can do that. But
Is-
again, the issue is that if TVA or TWRA comes along and says, show me your business license, then they can do whatever they want with you. It's impound your boat or charge you or throw you in jail or whatever. If you're
Yeah.
willing to take the risk, that's up to you. It's not up to us on this board.
Yeah, and I don't think we want to do anything that would move us towards any kind of commercial marina designation. That's just fraught with all kinds of stuff.
All right.
So, and by the way, when you're talking off-site boat storage, you're starting to cross that line too.
Well, it's a fine line, because I work with the Marine Advisory Committee as their liaison, and I'm a boater, and Alice and I love to ride the wave runners, and so I've got split feelings on this. But I know that there's 156 people on the waiting list. I know there's a group of people that want their kayaks. I know there's a group of people that want personal watercraft, and believe me, I feel for you. But at the same time, for this board to take the onus to go out and spend 200 grand this year on a dock, 200 grand next year on a dock, and then put one in Tenasseee and have to move the end dock out and then do it. So now you're going to be talking 400 grand. Why is the guy down the street with a dock not being pounded like we are to expand his? The business is there. Why doesn't he spend $500,000 to expand theirs and give us a place? Or Wind River, holy cow, let them put in $500,000 so our people can go across the lake. Or Rarity Bay. It's not my obligation, I don't think, on this board to spend my vote on money that not everybody in this community is going to use. Now, docks have been self-supporting. I'm a strong proponent of not an increase in docks and a strong proponent of reducing the kayak fee, and we'll get to all that. But it's not our obligation to put docks in for everybody, because we're going to get to the point, as I mentioned earlier, where you can't anymore.
No, you can't, absolutely. There's no way that you can put in a dock for every person that's ever going to want one here in
No.
Tellico
So
Village.
if you're going to put in $1 million this year to put in 3 more 32 slip docks, I keep asking myself the question, we have villagers that have their boats stored outside of Tellico Village at their convenience. Why aren't these people putting in docks? It's a money-making business. But they don't want to spend the $1 million either.
Well, and they're commercial marinas in most cases. And they, by the way, have already fulfilled all the requirements to be a commercial marina.
Right. Okay.
Okay.
So on the Tenasseee slip expansion, that's already in the next, 5, 6 years, right? We talked about it earlier this morning. So that one, we've made provision for.
Yep.
I don't think that as a village, we should build a boat storage facility. You know, number one, I don't know where we'd put it. And number two, it's kind of an eyesore in case you've never been in a commercial marina and seen those
Well,
facilities.
we've discussed one to put it at Clear Creek right across the street from Bruce's house, and boy, did he get hot.
And I said, wait till I move.
A 3-story boat storage facility that everybody driving up and down Tellico Parkway and
But
in
see,
2
that's
neighborhoods can look
that's
at.
not even our land.
And I know that too.
You know, so if somebody thought that there was a good business model for that, I'm sure somebody would have built a facility like that somewhere on this lake. You know, the problem with a boat storage facility is that's a kind of specialized operation. You're really going to store the boats on racks. You're going to have the equipment to move it in and out of the water. You're going to have the staff to do it. The insurance is outrageous on commercial marina property.
I think
So-
I think you'd be more likely, if you're going to do water storage, would be to have a big lot somewhere where you would do, kind of like we do in our RV, where you would store things, and then you would combine that with an off-site shuttle. You'd be more likely to get that done and put it somewhere where it's not visible than you would be to have whatever you call it, off-boat storage. It's
But it,
3 racks high.
to my knowledge, what they're envisioning in this is something where it's a rack and launch is what
I
it
know,
is.
I know.
You know, you basically
You
have
want
a
to walk
storage
down there and there are
facility
boats in
next
the
to the
water.
water.
Somebody put it in the water.
You call them up in the morning, I'm coming out of my boat today, put it in the water.
Yeah.
It would sure be nice. But
It
I
would be, but-
don't think it's this board or this community's obligation to supply it. Now, I know
I
there are
wouldn't
people
put
out
that
there
in the plan.
that are disagreeing, but me too. I would,
Well,
you don't have the property for it first. Unless somebody gives it to you.
So we talked about Chota, we have made provision for Tenasseee slips. What's the deal on the next one, off-site shuttle/parking
That's
system?
what it was, is if we put in more docks, for example, if we got permission from TVA and exceeded what they've given us now, what do we do about parking? So there was a suggestion that we do some parking lot somewhere and we shuttle people back and forth. So, same kind of concept that I mentioned about storing boats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I don't know where that came from, but at one
Well,
time.
it comes from the periodic issues that we have of getting the community
Parking places, yeah.
parking places at large events, such as Bratfest or an event here or a show or something, is that,
I think it came up when we were, I think you, Pat, kind of headed up or did a quick and dirty, I won't say quick and dirty, but you did a little bit of a study on parking, right?
Right.
And it came up with the fact that it's more of a parking problem, it's a scheduling problem.
right, right.
Okay.
Okay, so just leave that then?
Yeah, I would.
So right now, the only thing I've really got to add to the long-range plan is put in the placeholder for the Chota Center evaluation.
Bruce, does the fire department envision the need to expand the firehouse?
The only thing that they've talked about is that they need storage and also meeting space, and eventually they thought perhaps that maybe TVB would be, TVN now, it would be relocated into its own facility somewhere, because they thought that they would outgrow that up there, and then that whole facility there would then be used by the firehouse. But, so they do need some additional room for administrative and stuff like that, but I'm not speaking for the chief, but I don't think I've heard any desire to have more apparatus, more trucks, more pumpers.
I remember once talking to the chief, and he suggested that at some point in the future, a satellite, firehouse would probably have to be built in the Loudoun County part of the village. I haven't heard anything about that in the last 2 or 3 years.
I do know that at one time they talked about having a rescue truck located in different area, but I don't think that we were going to have 2 firehouses. I don't think that's
Okay.
been the desire.
So that probably doesn't have to be in the plan, at least for now.
You can talk to the chief, but I think more than anything, they need administrative space.
So the next one is Tenancy Clubhouse renovation / replacement. So, thoughts?
Well, you're going to have, as Steve said earlier, you're going to have to come to grips with, are these restaurants or are these, or they've outgrown what they were designed to be, and they can't grow a whole lot bigger. So if you want them to be full-scale restaurants, then you're going to have to do some kind of study to figure out what kind of restaurant and where they're going to be and how you're going to grow into them.
And how you going to fund it through reserves?
Exactly.
And you've got a very good long-range planning community survey from their last one. You're about to do another one. You compare the two to see what the wants and needs, and then you compare what that need is to what we have. The original developer landlocked us on a peninsula with limited parking. It's going to cost us a lot of money as a community to move things around. So I think you wait until the long-range planning survey comes out with their results, and then this board, whoever it is, this year or next year, puts together a study team, planning team to go in and see what it's going to take. And I think Winston had Jeff doing some of that stuff as he was, or as he is still working on, just ballpark figures, Go out and hire somebody to come in and do
So
an inspection.
basically, we wouldn't put anything in there right now.
No.
Okay.
I don't think you have enough information to put anything in there.
And then the last one on this list would be lakefront casual dining. And I remember when this came in the 2010 long-range plan, the thought was rent a barge and park it down below the yacht club.
Rent a barge.
And
Is that what you
frankly, TVA went, oh, no, you don't.
No.
Well, I thought there was talk of trying to do a tiki bar on the guest dock or something like that.
But the solution ended up being a barge.
Yeah, well, what I read out of the long-range planning, my interpretation was you have Cheers at Chota, and you have Lake Shore, and you have Lake House, and you have, Rick's at Tellico Harbor, something along that line. And again, we talk about food services and food service subsidies and getting back, and now you're going to throw another one in there.
Yeah, I
For what convenience? For people outside of Tellico Village or us? Because we like to go to Little Italy as well, and we like to go to Lake House and Lake Shore and Rick's and all these other places. So we as a community are going to take community dollars to put it in something that is, chances are, not going to be self-supporting. And it's going to take up lake space. And the Marine Advisory Committee last year, at the expense of the community, reconfigured the Tenasseee dock to add more parking spaces for boats in there. Went to the restaurant, went to the board and said, can you guys, and so, no. So, to me, it's a drop. I wouldn't do it.
So don't put that in.
Well, to me, part of this would also be looking at this facility. And can we expand outdoor dining here? I mean, we've got some limited, we've got a very narrow porch around the outside on the second level. We've got a big space at the bottom. If we could figure out how to make some of that covered, I think that would be good even for outdoor weddings and other types of things that people want to do. So,
Well, in fact, there was at one time a plan on the balcony that's outside the bar to blow that out 10 feet and then attach not a permanent structure, but like a tent over the patio.
On the lower level.
On the lower level.
I think there's some opportunity there. I think
Yeah.
if we had more outdoor dining capability, that people would take advantage of that.
I believe that's true.
That's a good idea.
So basically, that's
So
a,
don't get rid of it, just.
yeah, somebody
figure out
needs to,
what makes
come up with a plan. That's a yacht club plan.
sense. Right.
What do we see as the future of the yacht club? And again,
Yeah.
I would tell you that that requires a study group.
Yeah, I wrote that down as a separate line. I mean, just what you just said. What's the plan for this facility? This is our key facility. When people come in here, it's got great views.
It's the jewel.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, I think that wraps
Is
up.
there anything else that wasn't on this list that anybody has in their head? Apparently not.
Well,
Our heads are empty.
Well,
Oh, wait, Bruce is percolating over there.
I never see it, but we always talk about it, and I don't know how to address it unless you just want to put it here and then have a study. We've talked year after year after year about more meeting space and more, but we don't have any, we don't never address it really. So,
That's true.
We don't solve it.
But as I recall, when Pat studied parking, he also
Yeah.
studied meeting rooms, and the conclusion was the same,
Well-
scheduling issue.
Yeah, and that's why we put the scheduling
And we put a
software.
scheduling system in.
Yep. And
Has it
fortunately,
resolved it?
fortunately,
I haven't heard a lot of complaints.
well, and the number one complaint used to be you had to call, how many, Mitzi, 4 different places, 7, something like that. And now there's one location that the people that are savvy enough to log into this, they can schedule anywhere from pickleball to meeting rooms or anything they want. And again, there's always issues because some people want a room every day, and there's issues because some people book a room and don't show up. And, it's ongoing.
well, and as we said earlier, talking about the long-range planning committee, I would think a lot of these things would come out of that. We need to meld that into our 10-year financial plan as well.
Right.
To really start projecting those things and have a plan. Because they're not going to get done unless it's part of the financial plan.
Exactly.
Is there a reason to add in, on this list? the-
Can't hear you,
that-
Carla. You gotta speak up, please.
Is there a reason, or is there a need to add into this list, that property at the entrance to Kahidi? Just,
Well,
we're gonna talk about it at the board meeting.
we're gonna
it's
talk
just
about that at
not
the
on
board
list.
meeting. You're already on the agenda.
I get that, I just didn't know if it needed to be on this list because it is.
We can
potential
come back and
investment
revisit it
not
after your
included in the budget.
presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, with that, I think we'll segue into the Finance Advisory Committee obviously led the 3 days of budget reviews. They've came forward with a list of recommendations and strategic investments for the board to consider. This is not obviously all encompassing to all the issues, et cetera, in the budget, but one is to increase the assessment rate from the current 3.7% up to the 5% to support additional reserves. Increase growth in rec membership to above the 2019 level that it's currently in there. So basically, assess the entry point that memberships start out in 2022. Increase golf rounds.
Well, yeah, let me, I'll tell you what it means. If you look at what was projected, we're going to end 2021 at X, and we're going to enter 2022 at X minus a whole lot. So that to me, you're basically saying, oh, we're going to lose a whole bunch of members. So if you're going to have a budget that you're reaching for, you really need to challenge them to not lose those memberships.
That's exactly what that one was.
Yeah, I know that. I made it. Yes.
And again, I think some of these recommendations, obviously it's from the FAC, the other advisory committees in their respective areas, obviously like the Rec Advisory Committee supported what Simon brought forward on the membership, but the FAC felt that, you know,
So
it
all
was
of us
reasonable.
have participated in formulating budgets at our particular companies that we work for. When did any of us ever get the opportunity to enter a year less than where we ended the one previous?
Never.
Never. So I'm telling you that they should not project a huge drop-off in membership.
Okay.
You agree?
I agree 100%.
Okay, I will work with Simon to evaluate that and increase that membership.
Okay, thank you.
On the golf rounds,
one
FAC thought it would be reasonable to increase the golf rounds from the current 85,000 to 95,000. It's still less than what we've seen for this year, but I will say, like, as we continue to report financials for the remaining part of this year, Chris is seeing some softening in the golf rounds relative to last year. So I don't think we're going to have quite the, you know,
I'm just curious, where do you project golf rounds to end the year at? Welcome to my world.
This is frightening, 95,000 rounds. I don't think that that's setting ourselves up to be successful. The indicators in the golf community, locally, regionally, and the National Golf Foundation do not see this as being reasonable. They're projecting now that things are starting to level off post-pandemic ever so slightly. For the fourth month in a row here in Telco Village, we're trailing 2020. People
Okay.
are starting to get out and about, starting to travel a little bit. We've also had really good weather the last 2 years, very mild winters.
Right.
You know, you look at the last few days, we're taking it on the chin here in October. So looking at the data, and everybody's got their own opinion, but you know, the responsible approach that we took as a golf management team and a golf advisory committee was to increase rounds 20% over the average from 2017 to 2019,
Okay.
which is what we recommended. That's what's in our plan. So this will be
That
another
was the
10%.
85,000, right?
We're recommending 86,000.
86,000.
Correct. So that's what's in the current plan, which is 20% above what we had done for the years of 2017 to 2019. And it wasn't that long ago, we were averaging somewhere in the 70,000 round. So to give you some historical perspective, 2019 was our big year, and we did 75,000 rounds,
I understand.
pre-pandemic. So we're in uncharted territory, we're living in a unique time. We don't see a complete and total rebound or collapse in golf, but we do see some sort of rebound and anticipate that, and that's what we build into the plan.
And I understand that. Well, let's go back to the question I asked.
Sure.
Where do you project you will end the year from a rounds perspective?
And a little over 100,000 rounds.
Little over 100. So if you went to 95, that's a slight degradation.
Yeah, but again, it's the pandemic, the impact there early in the season. We had an unusually mild winter. I just think 95,000 is a stretch. And I'd
Okay,
rather,
well,
obviously, I know we got accused of sandbagging this year because we budgeted 78,000.
You didn't get accused of it, you did it.
No, we did not. We did not, because you look at the historical information, we for sure did not. We're
I
trying to be
understand.
responsible.
I'm just
Yes,
playing
sir.
with you,
I
you know
understand.
that, right?
Yeah, but I mean, 95,000, I mean, obviously, I saw that and I'm like, oh my gosh. Well,
So-
yeah, and hopefully we beat that. And if we do, we'll cheer and we'll,
So what
you
does
know,
the
pat
rest of
everybody
the
on the
board
back.
think about this one?
Well, a couple of questions. Right now, you're proposing 86,000
Yes.
rounds,
Correct,
and in there's a mix
correct,
of annual membership rounds,
correct.
guest, and daily rate rounds. It's real easy. You could raise your target to 95,000 rounds, and all that increase from the 86 is all in the annuals,
And
which
you-
doesn't bring, all it brings in is cart rental fees.
And not even to that extent. It's not that clear.
Right.
Correct. It's not that clean.
I would support possibly going to 90 cap, raise it 4,000 rounds of paying rounds, or another way to look at it, I don't know what the FAC was thinking when they raised it to the 95, if it's going to be all paying rounds.
We're going to ask them that one.
But
Well,
if you're looking at a
and there's a
revenue-
mix.
Always like paying rounds.
Okay,
For
so.
sure, and they're all
So the
paying
question is,
Part of the
so the
ration-
question is.
part of the rationale, though,
Excuse me, so the question is, if you're recommending going to 95,000 rounds over what was proposed, what's that delta in revenue? And what would that be if you spread that over the membership? So instead of the target rounds going up, you raise fees maybe $3 a round versus $2 a round.
So just to clarify where this was we were staring at the rebuild of Wind River and saying, how do we go out when they can't play golf and engage them as maybe not full rack rate people, but how would we engage them to say, let's give you a deal, so while you're shut down, we could make sure that we had a sustained golf program from Wind River being shut down all next summer.
Isn't
And that
there
was really-
already a reciprocal?
That was part of our rationale, and that really hasn't been factored into the existing rate structure or round structure we've seen in what we believe as well.
Chris,
This is an anomaly 2
what,
years.
Sue raised an interesting point. Do we have a reciprocal agreement with Wind River now?
We do not have a reciprocal agreement. We've had some discussions, and obviously, they would prefer not to have their members get used to coming over here. So,
Because our
in-
courses are better?
yeah, well, they are. But in response to that, they also they're gonna have a temporary setup to try to keep their members in. If you take an additional step further, most of the people that play on Wind River are not members. They still have a very small member base. So they've got temporary greens, they're trying to mitigate the losses there. I've had conversations with Director Rogoff, Kyle Hodges, about a reciprocal program, some opportunities there, so that dialogue will continue. But, you know, that's gonna be a May through September event.
Okay.
But again, it's just like Steve said, it's all a mix, right? So outside of our member play, it's all what's left over. To the extent of what's left over is smaller than it has been historically because we have more members that are playing more golf, and we see that. But you know, you're just changing the mix. You're not the total rounds is just a small piece of it, but we have taken the best information we have and tried to spread that mix percentage-wise.
Other board comments?
No, I like the idea about the Wind River. If that wasn't factored in your 86,000.
That was a stair-step rationale.
So if it wasn't factored in your 86,000, maybe it's another 1,000 rounds.
I've got the data, but I think Wind River in total does about 12,000 rounds a year. So we're
That's
not going to
it.
get all 12,000 rounds, no.
No.
Nobody plays there.
So you
right?
might pick up 500.
Maybe. And again, we're going to pick up something as needed, right? And that's going to be an opportunity, but I don't think it's going to be a game changer.
I think 95 is way too high.
I do too.
95.
Other comments?
Oh, in the golf advisory, we had this same comment, and I'll go along with his 86. And part of mine is all of us having worked in the business world, one of them is you're going to say, I'm planning for 86. 86 is still a reach for what we've done. You then had a COVID experience where this golf staff went above and beyond to keep us playing and outside, and us being creatures of habit, we all gravitated to golf because we had nothing else to do. That's good. So then he takes the average, I think it actually came up to be 80 or something like that, and he bumped it up to 86. And the Golf Advisory Committee agreed on that. So now, just like in the old days, we used to go in at the end of the year and you get beat up and not get your pay raise because you planned poorly, but you made the company $1.5 million a day, but you didn't plan good. So my point was, I think 86 is a stretch. I think it's an achievable goal, and if he makes it, hooray for golf. But if he doesn't make 95,000, we're going to pull him across the coals and beat him. Yeah, that's right.
So what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, you know, this is still kind of a question mark. This year was still an anomaly. So, you know, I think we need to see what, and I think next year, I agree, man, we're all hitting the road. So I think next year's an anomaly. So I would agree with the 86.
Marty?
I do too. I think the 95 is a good stretch goal, and I understand what the Finance Committee was trying to do there. But I also think that Chris and his team and the Golf Advisory Committee have a good calculation that they based it on, so go with that.
I think we're in consensus, 86.
He wants to talk.
One other
Well, he
question.
always wants to talk. He's as bad as you.
Did the FAC opine on the suggested rates? Or did you think that the rates should be adjusted for annual memberships or daily rack rate? What was the FAC's response to those?
Yeah, our consensus was the increases Chris proposed, you know, made a lot of sense vis-a-vis inflation and those types of activities. You know, to your point, the mix shift away from, I'm going to call it, lesser revenue rounds. So some of the junior things, some of the industrial programs, and getting people who are playing to really, you know, bring that average cost per, or revenue per round up would be important factors. And I think he's building some of those into the budget rate system, as well as taking account for the fact that we now have the best carts in the area, and the increases with the carts made a lot of sense to us. So it was really a question of, you know, and we don't know either, you know, are we going to continue to see 105,000 rounds a year? If we do, that's goodness for all of us, as long as people are paying to play those rounds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so moving right along,
Okay.
the next one is yours.
The other recommendation, which is just kind of standard of what we've done in the past, right now I've got a pretty conservative increase in the, not conservative meaning low, but it's a pretty good increase in the benefits. That process is going to culminate over the next month with Chris Carter and the new HR manager, Chris Kimbrough. We'll refine that impact on our salary and wages. Right now, it's close to $500,000 rolling through our salary and wages. I did include for the board this roll forward or walk from our 2021 budget to the 22 budget. So when we increased hourly wages $15 an hour, that impacted us almost $300,000 in wages. The 3.5% merit increase that the board approved accounts for 160, call it 168,000 in base wages. We still have the 160,000 in equity adjustment held at the admin level. The new staff, and that'll change with the cut that we discussed today, but that new staffing is 245,000. And I've got a little bit of noise in there with timing of folks. I've got partial year, et cetera. So that walks wages through 21 budget to 22. Some of these actions, they're really not decision points. the increase in $15 an hour has been made. Obviously, the merit increase has not. That's something for the board to consider. But I think based on market research and what HR presented, that labor market is what it is right now. The equity adjustment, obviously that's a piece to it. So there's a lot of reasons behind the increase in salary and benefits. Obviously, like Clayton said with the ACC, we continue to rationalize new positions and open positions as they're available. I don't have in here, and I could figure out some sort of hiring lag to take into account open positions that will occur during the year. This year, we've seemed to run around that 7 or 8 open positions at any given time. Obviously, the risky thing about doing that, it's what level position, because we have a wide range, Rick, as you know, because of all the work in the salary banding.
Yep.
We've got quite a wide range in rate for those positions, but that certainly is kind of an unbudgeted upside to the presented budget.
So the 491,000 benefit increase, what percentage is that?
It works out to be, it's very consistent year to year. On a percentage of gross wages, Charlotte, it worked out to be, what, an incremental 5%, I think? And I could get the board that as a percentage of wage. So,
But as a percentage of benefits, what?
Yeah, that's the number I'm looking for. So if I were to go
no,
out
it's
to.
a 20% increase.
It's 20%, okay.
Yes. And right now, Chris Carter, last time we spoke, that range goes from 10% to 40%. Obviously, I don't think we'll have to go into that 40% range. This is also the employer portion of the benefits. So when that whole thing renews, there's a committee, the comp committee, that will look at all the benefits and say, okay, what portion does the POA bear versus pushing it through to the employee? And last year, I think we were very generous in holding some of our benefits flat and having the employer take most of the increases. I don't think 2022 is the economic environment for us to do that. So when that evaluation happens, my guess is there will be a portion that will get pushed to the.
What's the current cost share for the average employee? Is it like 20%?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So premiums are gonna go up to the employee.
That's my guess, Steve, if I were to, because I don't think the POA can bear that whole increase.
Now, did you also do the comparison from 20 to 21? Because when I had asked for this comparison, we've got a $2.5 million increase. This accounts for whatever that difference is. 1 point, whatever it is. 2.5, 1.6. So there was almost $1 million increase from 20 to 21. So over a 2-year period, we're up by over $2 million.
Yeah, I've got a similar walk that went from the 2020 budget to the 2021 budget. But I think part of what you're asking is 2020 actuals to the 21 budget. And that I'm
22
still-
to the 22 budget.
Yes, and
Yeah.
that I'm still
Okay.
working on. But I just wanted to bring that up of really what that item number 4 will entail. I mean, there's quite a bit of work left in that particular line item. I don't think what you'll see in the next revision of the budget will be any higher than what we've currently got built in, but there's certainly upside.
Okay.
Number 5, like I said, we've got the meetings tomorrow and Friday to talk about the Cooper land acquisition. My intent was to present to the board once due diligence and the financials are finalized, present that as a separate budget and add it in as a post-consolidation entry, so to speak. Is there overlap? Absolutely not. There's not a lot of synergies between the two budgets. So I think we're okay to kind of treat that as, you know, two separate approvals and then bring them together so, you know, we can clearly lay out that mapping for
Okay.
everyone. FAC at the time had recommended that we update the 2022 dock capital for the higher number of slips. That was done
Yeah.
before the presentation today, so we talked about that. And then items 7 and 8.
Well, wait a minute, what, 6, what does that mean? I'm
We
trying to
origi-
figure out what the update the dock capital for higher number of slips per the 21 budget.
In an earlier version of the 22 budget that we presented, we had a finger at Tenassi for 14 additional docks. It was pointed out that in last year's
Okay, I got it.
plan
Okay, got
for
it.
2022, it was 32
Yeah,
for
so you
Tenassi.
bumped 14 to 32 and Tenassi instead, or Kahidi instead of Tenassi. Got it.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
The last two items really relate to what our discussion was on the, like, future investments, obviously dock expansions and amenities.
But what did those mean? Like, if you get 1, it's got 375. 2, it's got increased growth, and we talked about the numbers. And 3 has got specific. Everything is fairly specific. What does future dock expansions mean? And what does it relate to a fee going up, more in reserves? What are we talking about here?
No, it was an amenities question. So when we went through the original budget submission reviews, the number in for Kahidi, as he just mentioned, was wrong in terms of number of slips from what we had in prior plans, and it was wrong in dollar amount. So that was really corrected in 6. Then the question came along with, as we discussed earlier, there was yet another set for Tenassi. Where were they going to go, and at what timing phrase should they go in was a question. And then number 8 was absolutely what we just talked about previously, was what do we know of today, and then what's the long-range plan questionnaire and survey going to come back with and say we should be looking with for future amenities?
Got it, okay. Now, as long as I got you up there, let me ask you this question, because I know how people are going to read this. Number 1 says, increase assessment rate increase from 3.7 to 5. They just stop reading. They don't read the rest of it. Right there, they quit.
Doing it again.
What do you think?
And there's, and I know on social media, I'm going to get blasted. I live at 304 Skiatook Circle. You can come by my house anytime you want. I'll be happy to talk. But 3.7 to 5%. It is not 3.7 now. There was a
It is
recommendation.
in the budget submission. These are changes to the budget submission.
Right.
The budget submission as submitted and reviewed by us a week ago was at 3.75%
Right.
increase.
Yeah.
We're saying take that to the 5, which is the max allowable.
Right, and that's the next. But I wanted to clarify for those people that are going to go back and look on YouTube, and my point earlier, why I live at 304 Skiatook, there's only one person in here that's not on the advisory committee, and I think the last time I checked, there were 9 on the YouTube video. So there's 10 people watching this, and they're going to read 3.7 to 5%. There was a recommendation early at the 3rd meeting that we had, this being the 4th, that the Finance Advisory Committee said 3.7% looks like a pretty good number.
No, we did not.
No?
We did not.
What did you say?
We said 5.
They said 5.
So what is
We built the budget on 3.7. They're recommending we take it to 5.
to 5? Okay, and now to read the rest of the sentence, to support additional reserves. Finance Committee is and are made up of volunteer property owners, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So can you explain to those people on YouTube that are going to watch this what the last 4 words mean, to support additional reserves?
So this would fall exactly into the other activity built into this budget, which is to go through in 2022, do a formal reserve study and establish what are the required reserves that we need to have in place so that we are doing the proper maintenance and repair and replacement on existing amenities that we have in the community. And as we shared with you, it's probably north of $100 million plus of assets that we have responsibility for, the care and feeding of which will last over the next 30-plus years, and what it's going to take each year to repair, maintain, and replace those amenities. There's a second category, which is the new amenity activity, which is not included in a reserve assessment. And so just like we're thinking about things like the new golf complex, are there alternate ways to fund new amenities through timeless teleco, corporate sponsorship, independent raising, or including those within future budgets to go put those in place? That's the second category. The third category would be the annual operating funds, which we're talking about in the context here. If you stare at the overall business of the village, you know, rough numbers, there's $27 million of revenue that comes in. There's $25 million of expense that it takes to run this place. And the residual between those two, roughly $2 million, has to pay for saving for our future, for reserves, and/or building funds that we can decide in the future to build new amenities with, along with alternate funding strategies.
In other words, as we mentioned earlier, to keep this place as exciting as everybody that moved in here and continues to move in here finds this place, right?
Yep.
Or, part two, as I mentioned earlier, you have to make a choice. Do you want potholes, not finding sewers? You want the docks to float off, because that's going to cost us next year. You want all of these invisible amenities that we have and enjoy, such as a sewer smell or water gushing up, or all of these things, because they've got to be paid for. And what you're saying is there's $2 million in there that we can choose from the Finance Advisory Committee to this board. We can choose to keep that money in reserve, or we can spend in debt. So
Well,
we can overspend at some point.
Or find, there's really three avenues as I stare at Pat. One is you can save for the future, which is the reserves for repair and maintenance.
Right.
Two, you can increase user fees,
Right.
which people pay more for the activities that are out there to increase it, so you could do something in the future with that money. The third avenue is you can cut, to your point, amenities or services and take your spending down. At the end of the day, you're squeezing a balloon, but those are kind of the three things that you have to encompass.
Okay.
time out.
Yes.
I want to go on record now of saying that I oppose the reserve study, because I don't want you to give the indication that we have not done a reserve study. We have not done one to your satisfaction, I agree. However, we spent this past year doing a reserve study. We did two, actually, and the two were close in number as to what we think that we need for reserves.
And the
Now,
board approved a
and
reserve
the board approved a
for
reserve of 7.2 million untouched.
7.4 for 2022.
Untouched. So
Yep.
don't stand there and tell these people out there in the village that we have not done a
We
reserve
have not
study.
done a reserve study that's compliant with national standards.
I disagree
or
with you there, too.
Well, we have not, which is,
Well, that's
there's
your-
a national standard, and
that's
we are
your
far from
opinion.
compliant.
That's
So,
your opinion.
okay.
And
That's the whole-
everybody's got
that's the whole
opinion, so
FAC's That's the whole FAC's opinion.
thank you for your opinion, okay? I will say that we, at the time that we built Toka, we took amenities very low, and we have built those back up to the point now where we can, based on our study, have 7.2 million in reserves untouched for future. Now,
Which will grow over the next.
which will grow over the
20
next few
years.
years, okay? To the point that I would like to see, going back to this 3.7 versus 5, I want to see how much of that 0.5 is going to be contributed to reserves, okay?
I'm
Now,
sorry,
you need-
which point five? I'm not following your
This
point five.
0.5 increase, how much of that 0.5 increase are we going to put into the reserves?
I'm sorry, it's 1 point,
The
you're talking
5%.
3.7 to 5%?
Yeah.
I would
So
argue
how much
all
of that?
of that.
How much of that do we, because we as a board approved 7.2.
Okay.
Now, how much more are we going
Four.
to grow that 7.2?
7.4.
7.4.
Yes.
How much more are we going to add to that? Because we can go from if the 3.7 covers our expenses and our growth and expenses, and that we have the reserves in place that we need, why do we need to keep increasing this to get more reserves year after year after
Yeah,
year if we've reached the level where we need to be?
Well, if
Now,
I
I
can-
know you're gonna tell me, if you pass up on it this time, you'll lose that money forever. In my mind, that's greed, okay?
Well, if I can relate some history, when we did the clubhouses, and by the way, the board at that time voted unanimously to do both of the clubhouses, recognizing that we would take our reserves down to a significant level. You know, we also told the village, we're going to do these clubhouses, but until we hit our reserve target, you will get a 5% increase every year. Now, the next year, we established a reserve study committee, which consisted of Bruce, Steve, and our CFO. So, and by the way, the conclusion was a board vote in July that for 2022, the reserve level is 7.4 million. We're at that. So, do we tell the people here in the village, well, we were just kind of funning with you, we're going to do the 5% anyway?
Forevermore.
Well, and
because we're
frankly,
afraid if we
I
pass
think at
up on
this
something,
point,
we'll
you
never
cover
get it
your
back.
inflation for at least this budget year. And then, you know, we're not doing a reserve study for 2022, we're doing it for next year. That's what the board agreed to do when we approved the 7.4.
Okay, I'll just share with you, the FAC does not agree with the act. You're asking for my opinion, and the FAC's opinion. Our opinion is we do not agree that the reserve study was done to standards, and that we asked to have budgetary money put in 2022 to lay out what we need to do, so that we can all clearly.
There's no money in
have an underlying-
2022, it's in 2023.
No, sir, not in the submission.
2022.
It's 2022.
It's 2020.
2022 in the budget.
So,
I
Steve, before you
disagree
do
with
that, I just wanted to fill in a few blanks here in this discussion. I think a while ago, I mentioned a 1% increase in assessment works out to be about $120,000.
Right.
So given all of our discussion today, you're not talking a lot of additional funds. Charlotte has been busy trying to finalize the balance sheet and cash flow. And Steve will be able to share that with the board probably, I'd say, mid next week. What that shows right now is keeping $1.5 million as kind of an operating cash target. We talked about the change, and it'll be a formal board approval for a change in methodology to our reserves of having the kind of current year capital and maintenance put into a fund. And we just talked about almost $3.5 million of capital for 2022. We talked about maintenance. Maintenance is a huge piece of our spend. Then we finish with all the net income, and we're leaving golf flat as is. So I'll pick up a little bit of income from working with Simon on rec. But that net income and cash flow will flow through our reserves. So where we end right now in 2022 is basically back at our cash reserve target. What's not in there, and I would suggest if you increase the rate to 5%, that additional dollar, or call it, $150,000, goes into another reserve item of future amenities, because we just talked about a whole host of things, and that do not touch reserve, however you want to say it was studied or, derived. That's do not touch. We still need to save for future amenities.
No, we don't necessarily. And the reason why is, why should I sit here and pay for future amenities when the people that are going to arrive here in the future pay nothing?
Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
Okay, couple of things. I'll go on record right now, I fully support the 5%. I'll go on record right now, it says, two, we did not complete a formal reserve fund study.
That's
We did
because
it in-
we didn't pay $40,000 to have somebody do it.
Talk, please.
So, as I go back, we did not do a formal reserve study, we did an analysis through the help of Kevin. And when the vote was taken in July with regard to setting the reserve study at, do not touch fund at 7.4, I was out of town and I
So,
did not support the 7.4, at the record.
Okay.
Okay, well, then
Number
the vote
two,
would have been 6-1.
Until we get the final cash flows for all the changes, we have no clue what a 3.7% increase in the assessment results in your reserve funds. We need to see what it shows up, and then we assess what we have to do with the increase. Because until we see the total cash flows, we don't know if we need 4, 2.5, or 5. I would tend to agree that the 7.4 million that was analyzed and recommended and approved by the board as the do not touch fund, we don't know if that's the right number. That's why we're going to
That's why we
fund
want to do a study.
a formal reserve study in the 2022 budget.
And you're not going to know that until late 2022, probably.
Yeah,
Now,
so-
here's the thing, Steve. If you wanted to vote on that, you should have been here, okay? Either that, in attendance, in person, or through Zoom.
I am not going to address that here, Bruce, because we
Okay.
all know where I stood before you went to the meeting.
Okay, then it would have been a 6-1 vote. Okay. Okay, that's fine. Here, let me tell you, how did I start this conversation? I started the conversation by asking him how much of this 5% is going to go to reserves.
We won't know until he finishes the
All right.
cash flow analysis.
Then when we get there, if we're putting extra money into reserves over and above the 7.4 that we need, I'm saying that the rate doesn't need to be 5%.
Well, and
Now,
and
if you're
in
going to
fact,
tell me it ought to be 5% because we're going to leave money on the table, because every time that we don't do that, that's money lost that we could then compound. Yeah, you could do that, but if you're going to do that, Steve, then you better get ready to tell everybody in the village.
It's 5%
forevermore. It's
forever.
got to be for 5% forevermore. Now, if you're man enough to stand up and say that, let's say it.
okay, so we're not being asked to approve
No.
an assessment rate right now.
Nope. No.
The budget's built on 3.7.
Yeah, I just wanted to, I hate to start it, but I just wanted to know what the Finance Advisory Committee's recommendation for the 5% was.
Yeah, we
And
blew
to
them
make
out of that
sure
as if we were
that
going to accept
everybody
it.
that watched this in the future doesn't stop reading because they're going to say, it wasn't 3.7, it was 5. Well, they didn't read the whole sentence.
So all of this is linked, and what I would propose is, I'll get it to you ahead of time to review, but the balance sheet and cash flow, I could present, these are relatively minor changes. I could present both a 3.7% scenario as is, as well as a 5%, and then show you what that'll do to cash flow and total reserves. Okay?
See, and somewhere along the line, we got to get to the point, if we're ever going to get down below a 5% every year, then you're going to have to get to the point where you don't just do a shopping list every year to get up to 5%. Well,
Well, I tell you that last year's budget had a lot of stuff in it.
Right.
You know, this year's budget is a little more conservative, but not significantly.
And that's why we're underspent by almost $2 million in maintenance.
Bingo.
If I could chime in, can you guys hear me?
Carla would like to speak.
Carla?
I just wanted to say to the point of when we voted about that 7.4 million, that was with the caveat that was because we didn't have time to conduct a study and hadn't made the decision fully as to whether we wanted to conduct a third-party study. So we chose to vote in that number to,
Was that somebody else voting in the background?
yes, that was Eva voting in the background. She agrees, by the way.
And where is that person on the assessment increase?
Careful, they may say 7.
She's all for 0. But, no, the whole point is that that wasn't set in stone henceforth and forevermore that we weren't going to do a study and we adopted the 7.4, right? That was for the purposes of moving forward with the budget discussions for 22, and then we would continue to consider the FAC's recommendations otherwise.
I can hear her. So, yeah, the 7.4 was never a forever number. It was
Oh,
for
change it every
this year and this budget cycle. You know, money is in the budget for next year to do a more formal reserve study. At some point, the board will be asked to approve that expenditure. So, and, you know, I understand where the FAC is. I don't agree with them.
Okay. You asked for our opinion, we gave it.
I understand that, and I'm the person that's
Okay.
going to have to take the shit.
Okay.
You won't.
Okay. You asked for our
You and
opinion,
the
we
rest
gave
of
it,
us.
so.
In the end, I think the Finance Advisory Committee is doing their job.
I have no problem with that.
We still need to hear it, and just because some people are saying right now what their vote's gonna be in terms of the review.
I'm waiting until I see the whole thing.
We gotta wait till we hear it and then decide then. I don't think we're in a position today to say, hey, we either need a study or not. We have
So-
to hear what they have to say.
For another day.
So basically,
We don't have a good history.
would it
of
be very
studies.
difficult for you to recut the budget at 5%?
No.
I guess I'd like to understand it, if it's 5 versus 3.7.
Absolutely.
And by the way, 4% is inflation, you're giving them a little benefit.
Right,
Because you
like I-
wanted an even number.
Exactly.
No, I guess not. Okay, so,
Okay,
back at you.
that's fine. Well, I think I've got a good list of follow-ups and to-dos out of this meeting. I appreciate some of the decision points. Again, we'll turn this around quickly and schedule the final budget review for the board on the 27th and 28th of October, and we'll get that information out to the whole village and to the board.
So that's,
That
9
is-
o'clock meetings here, right?
Yes, so, yeah, all the budget meetings are here. So with that,
No,
if
no.
there's no other,
No,
He's
Mark
not
Pantley, Mark Pantley.
Oh.
Thank you, Mark. He said, I agree with what is being said about the reserve study, but this can, I said, that's not a verb. This has been kicked down the road for the last 2 years. Will it really be done in 2022? That's the plan.
well, that, yeah.
All right, Mark Pantley, has the existing reserve study been published? That's what you guys
Well,
reviewed.
there,
Right.
There was a
but
study
there was
done,
a study done.
contrary to what you say, Steve.
well,
Well,
okay,
they won't do
fine,
much
but the
more than
board, you know,
analysis
and the
either.
answer for Mark is, if he had attended to the board meeting on the 15th of July, he would have heard all about it.
Okay, but it's on the video, 15th of July, and it's in the minute meetings.
Exactly.
And otherwise, Bruce likes to talk to Mark. Yeah, Mark's a great guy.
Anyway,
All right. And that was the only question on there.
Okay.
okay,
Mr. President, if you want to conclude the meeting?
it's adjourned.
Steve,
All right, thank you.
Steve, if we give them all the data that they're gonna have, okay, because they can't come out here and get the data, so we give them all the data they got, it's not gonna be a study, they're gonna do an analysis too.
But they have the methodology.
Oh, they would.
Let me ask you this.